academically qualified to have strong opinions based on all. If that pisses you off, if you were already thinking, no, most people are too stupid to know they're stupid, and you probably are too. Right now, in this moment, you are confidently wrong about something. You have an opinion you are sure is correct, a belief you would defend, a position you think is obvious, and you are dead wrong, but you cannot see it. Because stupidity is not just about lacking intelligence, it is about lacking the ability to recognize that you lack intelligence. And that inability, that is the whole problem. You cannot fix what you cannot see. You cannot learn what you do not know you are missing. You are trapped inside your own ignorance, and your confidence is the lock. If that pisses you off, if you were already thinking, not me, I am self-aware, then congratulations, you just proved the point, because every idiot in history believed they were the exception. Drop a comment if you have ever been confidently wrong about something and only realized it years later. Share this video. Force people to confront how often they are the idiot in the room without knowing it. Here's what nobody tells you about stupid people. They do not know they are stupid. And it's not denial, it's not arrogance, it's structural blindness. The skill required to recognize incompetence is the same skill they lack. You need intelligence to recognize intelligence. You need competence to see competence. And if you have neither, everyone looks the same to you. The genius and the moron, the expert and the fraud. You literally cannot tell the difference because you do not have the tools to measure the gap. Arthur Schopenhauer figured this out 200 years before Dunning-Kruger proved it scientifically. He watched it happen everywhere, in universities where mediocre professors spoke with absolute authority, in social circles where ignorant people dismissed brilliant ideas they couldn't even comprehend, in positions of power where fools made decisions affecting thousands of lives, completely unaware of how unqualified they were. And he documented the exact mechanism, not just that idiots think they are smart, but why they are psychologically, structurally incapable of ever realizing they are not. And here's the part that should terrify you. You are an idiot about something, maybe many things. You have areas where you are confidently incompetent, where you speak with certainty but lack expertise, where you have opinions but no real understanding. And the worst part? You don't know which areas those are, because if you knew, you wouldn't be an idiot about them anymore.
I'm going to
The
sleep.
Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just apply to other people. It applies to you, right now. The question is not whether you are ever stupid. The question is whether you have enough humility to recognize when. Here's the core mechanism Schopenhauer identified, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Intelligence requires the ability to perceive complexity. But perceiving complexity requires knowledge.
Drop a
Which means
like,
if you were too
subscribe. I'll
ignorant
talk to
see
y'all tomorrow.
complexity, everything looks simple.
Thank you. Big
And
love.
if everything looks simple, you feel certain. This
Thank
is
y'all
what
for the
Schopenhauer
support.
called the fool's paradise, a state of blissful confidence created by complete ignorance of how much you do not know. You cannot see the depths because you've never been deep enough to know they exist. Surface level is all you see, so surface level feels like everything. Think about learning any skill: guitar, chess, programming, writing, philosophy. When you first start, before you have tried it yourself, you think, this doesn't look that hard. You watch someone skilled and you genuinely believe you could probably do that too. It looks simple, straightforward, easy. Then you actually try and you are terrible, humiliatingly bad. And suddenly you realize, oh, there's way more to this than I thought. There are layers I did not see existed, techniques I did not know existed, complexity I completely missed. That moment of realization, that is the beginning of actual competence, because now you can see the gap. You know what you don't know. You have felt the distance between where you are and where skill actually lives. But idiots never have that moment. They never progress far enough to see the complexity. They stay at the surface forever, looking at the skill from the outside, judging it based on what it looks like, not what it actually is. And because they never go deeper, they never realize how shallow their understanding is. They remain in the state of, this looks easy, confident, certain, completely unaware that they are standing at the base of a mountain they cannot even see. To them, the whole thing looks like a small hill they've already climbed. Schopenhauer saw this constantly among his academic peers. Philosophers who had never studied deeply, who had never spent years working through difficult texts, who had never built rigorous logical arguments, would confidently dismiss entire schools of thought, not because they examined those schools and found them flawed, but because they could not perceive the depth they were dismissing. To them, philosophy was just people sharing opinions about life. Simple, subjective, nothing complicated about it. They couldn't see the logical structures underneath, the epistemological frameworks, the centuries of refined argument, the careful distinctions between concepts that look similar but mean completely different things. All of that was invisible to them, so they felt perfectly qualified to have strong opinions based on almost no knowledge, and their confidence never wavered because they genuinely could not see what they were missing. The modern version of this is everywhere, and it has gotten worse. Someone reads a headline about economics. Now they are certain they understand monetary policy. They can tell you exactly what the Federal Reserve should do, why inflation is happening, how to fix the economy. Never mind that they have never studied economics. Never mind that they do not understand the models economists use or the trade-offs every policy creates. They read an article. They have an opinion. And that opinion feels just as valid to them as an expert's analysis, because they cannot see the difference. Someone watches a documentary about history. Now they can definitively explain why Rome fell, why World War I started, why civilizations collapse. They have a clean, simple narrative, a few key causes, a clear lesson. Never mind that historians spend entire careers studying these events and still disagree. Never mind that historical causation is incredibly complex, that every explanation leaves out a dozen other factors, that the more you study history, the more ambiguous it becomes. They watched a 2-hour documentary. They feel informed, and informed feels the same as expert to them. Someone listens to a podcast about psychology. Now they can diagnose everyone around them. They know why people behave the way they do. They can explain trauma, attachment styles, personality disorders, cognitive biases. They throw around terms like narcissist, and gaslighting, and projection with complete confidence. Never mind that they have never studied psychology formally. Never mind that diagnosis requires years of training and careful observation. They heard the concepts explained. They recognize the patterns, and recognition feels like understanding. This is the trap. They have surface level information, but they cannot perceive the depths they are missing. So surface level feels complete, feels sufficient, feels like expertise. And they speak with the confidence of people who have studied for years while knowing almost nothing. And because they cannot see the gap between familiarity and expertise, their confidence never breaks. Schopenhauer wrote, "The person who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience." Why? Because fools cannot tell the difference between shallow and deep. To them, a complex argument and a simple assertion look the same. Both are just words on a page. Both are just ideas being expressed. They cannot perceive the difference in rigor, in evidence, in logical structure. So they choose the simple one, because it is easier to understand. And they mistake ease of understanding for truth. If I can understand it quickly, it must be right. If it requires effort to understand, it's probably just overcomplicating things. This is why clickbait works, why conspiracy theories spread, why confident idiots get bigger audiences than careful experts. Because the idiot's message is simple, clean, certain, no caveats, no nuance, no "it depends," or "in some contexts," or "the research suggests but does not prove," just clear, confident answers. And to someone who cannot perceive complexity, that clarity looks like truth, looks like intelligence, looks like someone who actually knows what they're talking about. The expert, meanwhile, sounds uncertain, speaks in qualifiers, says generally, and in most cases, and the evidence leans toward. And to the idiot, that sounds weak, sounds like the expert doesn't really know. Because the idiot cannot see that uncertainty is the language of actual knowledge, that anyone who understands complexity knows nothing worth understanding is simple, that real expertise always comes with doubt, because the more you know, the more you see the exceptions, the edge cases, the contexts where the rule breaks down. Certainty is the language of ignorance. Nuance is the language of understanding. But idiots cannot hear the difference, so they trust the certain voice, and they dismiss the careful one as overthinking. Here's a pattern you've definitely noticed, but maybe never named. Someone has surface level exposure to a topic. They read a few articles, watched some YouTube videos, heard discussions, scrolled through Twitter threads, and now they speak with the confidence of someone who has studied it for years. They do not realize that familiarity and expertise are completely different things, that knowing about something is not the same as knowing something. Schopenhauer called this the illusion of comprehension. You've heard the terms, you know the basic concepts, you can follow a conversation about it, so you assume you understand it. But there's a massive difference. Familiarity means you've been exposed to ideas. You recognize them when you see them. You can nod along when someone talks about them. Expertise means you can work with those ideas, apply them, test them, see where they break, know their limitations, know what they actually mean beyond the surface definition. Familiarity is passive. You absorbed information. Expertise is active. You wrestled with information until you understood it deeply enough to use it. And idiots cannot tell the difference, because to them, hearing about something feels like understanding. Think about how this plays out. Someone hears about Stoicism, reads a few Marcus Aurelius quotes on Instagram, sees some Ryan Holiday content, and now they're giving life advice based on Stoic philosophy. They talk about accepting what you cannot control, about focusing on your response rather than external events. They sound informed, they use the right words, but ask them anything deeper. What is the Stoic view on preferred indifference? How does Stoicism resolve the tension between fate and moral responsibility? What distinguishes Stoic ethics from Epicurean ethics? How do Stoics define virtue and why that definition matters? Blank stare, silence, or worse, they make something up that sounds plausible but is completely wrong because they don't actually understand Stoicism. They're familiar with some quotes, with some surface concepts, but familiarity feels like understanding, so they speak with confidence about something they barely grasp. Schopenhauer experienced this constantly in academia. Colleagues would mention his work in conversations, use his terminology, reference his ideas. He would think, oh good, they have read my work. Then they would say something that proved they completely misunderstood the fundamental premise. They were familiar with his ideas, they could name drop correctly, they could use the jargon in sentences, but they had not understood. They absorbed surface patterns without comprehending what those patterns meant, and they could not tell the difference. To them, being able to reference something was the same as understanding it. The modern explosion of this is social media. Everyone is familiar with everything. No one understands anything deeply. You scroll through content on neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, politics, economics, history. You see infographics, hear sound bites, absorb talking points, and that familiarity creates an illusion. I know about this. I have seen discussions about it. I have heard multiple perspectives, so I am informed. But knowing about something is not knowing something. Seeing debates is not understanding the subject being debated. Hearing perspectives is not having the expertise to evaluate which perspective is correct. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." But idiots hear opinions and think they have acquired facts. They see perspectives and think they have grasped truth, because they cannot distinguish between exposure and understanding, between recognition and comprehension. And that inability is what keeps them confidently ignorant forever. Here's why this matters, and why it is so hard to fix. When you mistake familiarity for expertise, you stop learning. Because why would you study something you already understand? Why would you invest time and effort into deepening your knowledge when you already feel like you get it? So you remain at surface level forever, consuming content, hearing ideas, feeling informed, while never actually becoming competent. And your confidence grows in proportion to your exposure, completely independent of your actual understanding. This is why idiots think they are smart. They have confused recognition with comprehension. They have heard about things, so they think they know things. They can participate in conversations, so they think they are qualified to have strong opinions. and their confidence grows with every article they skim, every video they watch, every tweet they read, because each exposure reinforces the illusion that they understand. The practice: before speaking confidently about something, ask yourself, could I teach this to someone else? Not just repeat what I have heard, but actually explain it in a way that builds understanding. Could I defend this position against expert counterarguments? Do I know what the strongest objections are, and do I have responses that hold up? Could I apply this concept in a novel situation I have never seen before? Can I use this knowledge, or do I just recognize it when I see it? If the answer is no, you are familiar, not expert. And familiarity should make you curious, not confident. Should make you want to learn more, not speak more. Intelligent people know the difference. Idiots do not. And that is why idiots are so loud, while experts are so quiet. Here's something Schopenhauer identified that is absolutely brutal. To recognize that someone is better than you at something, you need to be somewhat competent yourself. If you are completely incompetent, you cannot even perceive excellence. You lack the framework to recognize it. A child watching a chess grandmaster cannot appreciate the genius of the moves. To them, it's just pieces being moved around a board. The brilliance is invisible. A person with no musical training cannot distinguish a virtuoso from a competent amateur. They both sound good. The subtle differences in technique, in interpretation, in control, all of that is lost. They cannot hear it, not because they are not paying attention, but because they don't have the training to perceive what makes one performance exceptional and another merely adequate. This is what Schopenhauer called the competence threshold for recognition. You need baseline competence to recognize superior competence, which means if you are truly incompetent, everyone looks roughly the same to you, the expert and the amateur, the genius and the mediocre. You cannot tell the difference because you don't have the knowledge structure to perceive the difference. And this creates a devastating cycle. Because you cannot recognize excellence, you don't know what to aspire to. Because you don't know what to aspire to, you never develop the skill to recognize excellence. Because you never develop that skill, you remain unable to see the gap between yourself and actual competence forever. Schopenhauer saw this among philosophy students constantly. They would read Immanuel Kant, one of the most rigorous, systematic philosophers in history. Then they would read some random person's blog post about philosophy, and they would think both are just opinions about reality. Both are equally valid. Both are just different perspectives. They could not see that Kant built elaborate logical systems with internal consistency and carefully defined terms and responses to every obvious objection, while the blogger just shared unexamined assertions and personal feelings dressed up as insight. The difference in quality was enormous, but seeing that difference required philosophical training these students did not have. So to them, all philosophy looked the same, just people sharing their thoughts. The modern equivalent is everywhere, and it's maddening if you actually have expertise in something. Someone cannot tell the difference between a peer-reviewed scientific study and a blog post that references science, between an expert's careful analysis and a confident person's opinion, between a well-reasoned argument and a well-delivered speech, between someone who knows what they're talking about and someone who just sounds like they do, because they do not have the competence to see the distinction. The markers of quality are invisible to them, so when they produce low-quality work themselves, they genuinely think this is as good as what experts do. In their perception, it is the same. They are not being arrogant, they are being blind. Their incompetence is so complete they cannot see the gap between themselves and actual skill. Naval Ravikant talks about specific knowledge, knowledge that cannot be taught in a classroom, knowledge that comes from experience, from deep study, from years of practice. And idiots cannot see specific knowledge. It is invisible to them. They see what everyone sees, surface patterns. They miss what experts see, deep structures, subtle distinctions, non-obvious connections. And missing it, they assume it does not exist. They think the expert is just doing the same thing they are, maybe with more confidence or better marketing. They cannot perceive that the expert is operating on a completely different level. Example: someone writes an essay. It is poorly structured, uses fallacious reasoning, makes unsupported claims, ignores counter-arguments, has weak transitions. But to them, it looks just like the professional essays they have read. They cannot see the logical gaps in their argument, cannot see the lack of evidentiary support, cannot see how their conclusion does not follow from their premises. cannot see that they have not addressed the obvious objections, because seeing those flaws requires analytical skills they do not have. So they submit it with confidence, maybe even feel proud of it, while an expert reading it sees glaring problems on every page, structural failures, reasoning errors, gaps so obvious they are painful. The gap between their self-assessment and reality is massive, but they cannot perceive the gap, and that's the whole problem. That is what makes incompetence so durable. It protects itself. It cannot see itself, so it cannot fix itself. What this means, when idiots think they are smart, it is not delusion, it is not arrogance, it is blindness. They are genuinely unable to see how far they are from competence, because seeing that distance requires the very competence they lack. They are trapped in a perceptual prison built by their own limitations, and no amount of telling them they are wrong will help, because they cannot see wrong. To them, everything looks right. Schopenhauer wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Add to that, idiots cannot even see that targets exist. They think showing up is the same as hitting the mark. They think participation equals excellence, and they have no framework to understand otherwise. But here's where it gets interesting, where the trap gets even more sophisticated. Some idiots are not confidently simple, they are confidently complex. They use big words, reference obscure concepts, construct elaborate theories, and because it sounds complicated, they assume, and others assume, they are being intelligent. Schopenhauer called this complexity as a substitute for depth, the belief that if something is hard to understand, it must be profound. But Schopenhauer knew better. Complexity can hide stupidity just as effectively as it can express intelligence. Actually, it's often better camouflage, because simple stupidity is obvious, everyone can see it. But complicated stupidity, that can fool people. That can sound impressive. That can pass for intelligence in environments where nobody actually understands the subject well enough to spot the fraud. Think about academic writing, business jargon, pseudo-intellectual conversations at parties. Someone says, "The paradigmatic instantiation of post-structural dialectics reveals the inherent contradictions in hegemonic discourse frameworks." And it sounds smart, right? Sounds like someone who knows what they're talking about. But strip away the jargon and you get, "Looking closely at modern ideas shows contradictions in dominant narratives." The complex version doesn't say more, it just says it in a way that is harder to parse, and that difficulty gets mistaken for depth. Schopenhauer was absolutely vicious about this among his contemporaries. He would read philosophical papers filled with technical terminology, elaborate sentence structures, references to obscure texts, complex grammatical constructions, and beneath all that complexity, often nothing. No actual insight, no new understanding, just familiar ideas dressed up in complicated language, obscurity masquerading as profundity. He wrote, "It is just as much a sickness to keep digesting knowledge in the mind without giving it any discharge in work as it is to eat much and not digest." These people consumed complex ideas but didn't digest them into understanding, so they just regurgitated complexity, thinking that's what intelligence looks like, thinking if they sound complicated, they must be smart. The modern version is TED Talks, corporate presentations, academic conferences. Someone delivers a presentation filled with neuroscience terminology they barely understand, frameworks they did not create, studies they cite but have not actually read, buzzwords that sound innovative, synergy, paradigm shift, disruptive innovation, neuroplasticity, quantum consciousness. And because it is complex and delivered confidently, audiences think this person is brilliant. This person knows something I do not. But ask them to explain the actual mechanism, to defend the position against expert critique, to apply it in a novel situation, and the facade collapses, because they were not demonstrating intelligence, they were performing it, using complexity as costume. Marcus Aurelius cut through this perfectly. If you cannot explain something in simple terms, you do not understand it. Real understanding can toggle between complex and simple depending on who you were talking to, can be technical with experts and clear with beginners. Performed intelligence can only do complex because that is where the gaps in understanding can hide. How do you spot this? Ask someone to explain their complex idea simply, not dumbed down, not condescending, just clear. If they can, they understand it. If they cannot, if they just repeat the complexity in different words, If they say, well, it is complicated as a defense rather than as an accurate description, they are performing. They're using language they do not fully comprehend to create the impression of knowledge they do not have. Schopenhauer spent years simplifying profound ideas, making difficult philosophy accessible without making it shallow. His contemporaries criticized him for it. Real philosophy should be difficult to understand. Accessibility is for amateurs. But Schopenhauer knew that difficult to understand and deep are not the same thing. Sometimes the deepest truths are simple once you truly understand them, and complexity is often just confusion dressed up as sophistication. The person who cannot explain their idea simply does not understand it well enough, and they're using complexity to hide that fact from others and maybe from themselves. Here's the most frustrating trait Schopenhauer identified, and this is why arguing with idiots is completely pointless. You cannot correct an idiot, not because they refuse to listen, though many do, but because they do not have the framework to process correction. Correction requires you to recognize that you were wrong, which requires you to perceive the gap between your belief and reality. But if you cannot perceive that gap, you cannot be corrected. You'll just interpret correction as disagreement, as a different opinion, as someone else being wrong. Schopenhauer called this the closed loop of ignorance. Ignorance prevents you from seeing evidence. Not seeing evidence reinforces ignorance. You are trapped in a cycle you cannot break from the inside. The only exit is acquiring the competence that lets you see you were incompetent. But you cannot acquire that competence while you are convinced you already have it. So you stay trapped forever, confidently wrong, immune to correction. Think about the last time you argued with someone who was confidently wrong. You presented evidence, they dismissed it. That's just your opinion. You showed them data, they questioned the source. That study is biased. Who funded it? You used logic, they didn't follow. You're overcomplicating it. The answer is simple. Every tool you used failed, not because the tools were bad, not because your argument was weak, but because they did not have the equipment to receive correction. It's like trying to send an email to someone who doesn't have an email address. The message is clear, the delivery method works, but they cannot receive it. They don't have the infrastructure. Schopenhauer experienced this constantly in academic debates. He would present carefully constructed arguments against his opponent's positions, multi-page analyses, precise definitions, clear logical steps, anticipation of objections, and they would respond with complete mischaracterizations of what he said, straw man fallacies, total misunderstandings. And when he pointed this out, when he said, "That is not what I argued," they could not see it, because seeing it would require the philosophical training they lacked. So they just doubled down, restated their misunderstanding with more confidence, because to them, they had responded to his argument. They could not see that they had responded to something he never said. The modern version is every internet argument ever. Someone makes a claim, you provide counter evidence. They don't engage with the evidence, they just restate their claim, often in the exact same words. You point out the logical fallacy in their reasoning, they don't understand what a logical fallacy is, so they get defensive, think you are attacking them personally rather than critiquing their argument. You're speaking different languages, and they cannot learn yours because they don't know it exists. To them, an argument is just two people stating their opinions louder and louder until one gives up. The idea that there are rules of logic, standards of evidence, methods of reasoning, all of that is invisible to them. Naval Ravikant observed, "Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want." Apply this here. The desire to be right is a contract idiots make to never learn anything, because learning requires admitting you were wrong, and admitting you were wrong requires perceiving that you were wrong. And if you cannot perceive the gap between your belief and reality, you can never admit wrongness. So you never learn, you never grow, you remain confidently ignorant forever. And every correction, every piece of evidence, every logical argument just bounces off because you don't have the receiver. The mechanism works like this. Imagine someone who believes the Earth is flat. You show them photos from space. They say those are fake, CGI, Photoshop. You explain the physics of gravity, of planetary formation. They don't understand physics, so they dismiss it. That's just theory, not proven. You point to ships disappearing over the horizon, bottom first. They have an alternate explanation. Perspective, the limits of human vision. You show them time-lapse videos of star trails. They say those are manipulated. Every single piece of evidence gets reinterpreted through their existing framework, because accepting the evidence would require abandoning the framework. And they cannot abandon the framework because it's the only one they have. It's how they make sense of the world. To give it up would mean admitting they were massively wrong about something fundamental, and they cannot handle that. So they protect the framework at all costs, reinterpret everything to fit, dismiss anything that doesn't. This is why Schopenhauer said, we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. But idiots have forfeited something else, the ability to change. They have locked themselves into their current understanding, welded the doors shut, and no amount of evidence can reach someone who has locked themselves in from the inside. You cannot break down the door. They have to open it themselves, and they will not, because they do not see a door. They do not see walls. To them, they are not trapped, they are right, and you are the one who cannot see clearly. What this means? You cannot argue someone out of a position they did not argue themselves into. If their confidence comes from ignorance, evidence will not fix it. Logic will not fix it. Data will not fix it, because they do not have the framework to process any of it. Schopenhauer knew this. Some people are unreachable, not because they're stubborn, not because they are willfully ignorant, but because they are structurally incapable of receiving correction. And spending energy trying to fix them is just frustrating yourself while accomplishing nothing. So here is what Schopenhauer would tell you about why idiots think they are smart. It is not arrogance, though it looks like arrogance. It is structural blindness. They do not know what they do not know. They mistake familiarity for expertise. They cannot recognize superior skill because they lack the competence to see it. They use complexity as camouflage for shallow thinking. They are immune to correction because they cannot perceive their own errors. And they surround themselves with people who reinforce their beliefs because disagreement feels like hostility to them. Each mechanism reinforces the others, creating an impenetrable fortress of confident ignorance. And here is what is brutal, what is almost tragic. They are not lying. They are not faking. They genuinely believe they are intelligent, because from inside their fortress, they cannot see outside it. The walls are too high, the blindness too complete, the feedback loop too tight. Schopenhauer wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. But idiots? Idiots cannot even see that targets exist. They think existence is just wandering around, and they are doing it perfectly. They have no framework for excellence, no perception of skill, no awareness of depth. So they rate themselves highly because they have no standard to measure against. And they will argue with you about how smart they are with complete confidence, forever." Now here's the terrifying question, the one you've been avoiding this entire time. How do you know you are not one of them? Because every idiot believes they are intelligent. Every incompetent person thinks they are competent. Every fool is confident, including you, when you're being a fool. So how do you escape the trap? How do you avoid being the confidently wrong person you've been judging this entire video? Schopenhauer's answer is simple and brutal. Doubt. Intelligent people doubt themselves constantly. Not paralyzing doubt, not the kind that stops you from acting, but productive doubt. The kind that asks, am I sure about this? What might I be missing? Who knows more than me? What evidence would change my mind? What are the strongest arguments against my position, and can I respond to them honestly? Idiots never ask these questions. Their certainty protects them from doubt, feels like strength, feels like confidence. But intelligent people, they live in doubt, because doubt is the only antidote to comfortable ignorance. Doubt is what forces you to keep learning, to keep testing your beliefs, to keep checking whether what you think you know is actually true. Naval again. The modern devil is cheap dopamine. The modern angel is free education. Add this. The modern idiot is someone who chooses dopamine over education while calling it wisdom. Someone who watches YouTube videos and thinks they are learning, who scrolls Twitter and thinks they are informed, who listens to podcasts and thinks they are educated. Consumption is not learning, exposure is not understanding, and confidence based on shallow familiarity is just ignorance that learned to speak loudly. Here is the challenge, and this is not rhetorical, this is actual homework. Pick one thing you are confident about, really confident, something you would argue about, something you think you understand well. Now, spend the next week actively looking for the strongest arguments against your position, not the weak ones you can easily dismiss, the strong ones, the ones that actually make you uncomfortable, the ones that experts on the other side use. If you cannot find good counterarguments, you are not looking hard enough. And if you find them but cannot engage them honestly, cannot steel-man them before you respond, you are being an idiot about this topic. And that's okay. We all are about something. The question is whether you have the humility to recognize it. If this made you uncomfortable, if you felt defensive reading this, if you thought multiple times, but I'm not like that, good. That discomfort is your intelligence fighting your ego's desire for certainty. Listen to it, feed it, let it grow. Because Schopenhauer knew the wisest person is the one who knows how much they don't know. And the biggest idiot is the one who cannot perceive the depths of their ignorance. You are probably an idiot about something right now. The question is whether you are brave enough to find out. What?
Hello everybody, today we're going to be discussing one of the most controversial, impactful, and disturbing black and white movies ever made, All Quiet on the Western Front. The story of this film and the people who made it have set it apart in film history as one of the most important movies ever made. And to understand why that is, we need to look at the story itself. All Quiet on the Western Front was adapted from a book titled In the West, Nothing New by author Erich Remarque. Erich was a German soldier during World War I who fought on the Western Front against France and Britain. In the book, he used a fictional character by the name of Paul to use as a stand-in for himself and the horrors that he saw during his time at war. The book was first published in 1928, just 10 years after World War I ended, and then 2 years after that, in 1930, it was then made into a movie by Universal Studios. The world politics of 1930 were complicated to say the least. Again, World War I had just ended, and it wouldn't be too long before World War II began. So during this time, director Louis Milestone, who himself was a veteran of World War I, decided to make a movie about this novel written by a German soldier. He didn't stop there, as nearly all of the extras and several of the cast and crew were veterans of the war themselves. So, at a time when propaganda was prevalent in order to maintain morale for one's country and military, they decided to make a film that would show audiences at large, for the first time, what war was really like. As you can imagine, that led to a lot of backlash, but we'll talk about that later. For now, I want to go through the movie itself, break down several of the scenes as well as the plot, and get across to you why it's so disturbing and why it's so important. Because at a time in history when everyone's patriotism to their own country was in such prevalence, this group of American veterans decided to make a film about the horrors of war as seen by German soldiers. And using experiences across continents, they joined together to send one message: war is hell. Perhaps nothing sums up the movie and the book better than the message that appears at the beginning of both. This story is neither an accusation nor a confession, and least of all, an adventure. For death is not an adventure to those who stand face to face with it. It will try simply to tell of a generation of men who, even though they may have escaped its shells, were destroyed by the war. I'm also going to give a warning now. Despite being made in 1930, this movie has some very brutal depictions and bloody depictions of the war, so if that's something you're sensitive to, you may want to sit this one out. Why, hello there. If you're wondering what I'm doing tired on this much lower quality camera, it's because I am at my limit. I have attempted to upload the video you are currently watching 7 times at this point, with this current version being the 8th iteration. The reason being, the copyright system and YouTube's copyright system are horrifically broken. And despite my resizing, recoloring, background music, mirroring, and like 5 layers of visual edits at this point, I've been unable to upload this video in any region in the entire world. And despite my clips being fair use, YouTube's Content ID does not want to hear it. So Glenn the Golden on Twitter told me that if you add a face cam to a clip, it can typically get by the Content ID systems, which if you're watching this right now, it means it worked, and thank you, Glenn. I feel that the clips that I showed in the video are important to get across the purpose of this video, and I don't have commentary to give you while I'm watching the clips because that's what the point of the rest of the video is. So instead, and this is an experiment for all of us to see if it works, I am going to be in the top corner of the clips you're watching, passive-aggressively eating hummus. And we'll see if YouTube considers this transformative. So, cheers to you two. We really couldn't do it without you. So if all of that sounds interesting to you in a dark, brutal, semi-depressing sort of way, which, welcome to the channel, then stick around as we break down All Quiet on the Western Front. But before we do that, let's hear from someone who is, surprisingly, in a much darker place than I am right now. Why, hello there. You're probably wondering what I'm doing in the great outdoors, and the answer is I'm simply enjoying the magic of nature. And you know what's the most magical gift that nature has to offer us? That is right, today's sponsor, Magic Spoon. See, I lied to you earlier. I'm actually out here in nature because I've determined that Magic Spoon is made not by humans, but by magical elves. And I have ventured here far out into the wilderness to kill them. I mean, simply speak with them to understand how they made such a healthy cereal that is also incredibly addicting. For those of you that have seen my previous ads, you'll know that Magic Spoon is the low-carb, keto-friendly breakfast that's gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free as well. And you'll also know that Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, only 4 net grams of carbs, and 140 calories per serving, but that doesn't matter because what does matter is that it tastes so good that I can't stop. Like, look at me. I'm out here in the middle of all of this, and I bring this with me. Do you know how demeaning it is whenever you're at the campfire and everyone else is eating SpaghettiOs or perhaps an MRE, and you have to use your bare hand to reach into a cereal box because you didn't bring a spoon? Do you see this? Do you see what I am? This is the YouTuber lifestyle, kids. Take notes. I've been fighting the ants over this for the past 2 days. And if you ask me if I had it to do all over again, I do the same thing because it's a problem. So if you want to be like me, minus the crazy woodsman part, and get in on this fantastic cereal, now's the time to do it. Because today, if you go to the link in the description at magicspoon.com/Wendigoon, you will be able to get your Magic Spoon order for $5 off. That is right, you can get in on this addiction, I mean healthy breakfast option today for $5 off by going to the link in the description at magicspoon.com/Wendigoon. You can buy by the box or in bundles. Some of my personal favorite are the s'mores, the blueberry, the frosted, and the honey, although I feel like you really can't go wrong, or at least I haven't found it yet. So get in on Magic Spoon today, and then join me in my search through the woods where we find the people who made this cereal, and then just talk, I promise. Thank you all so much for watching the ad, and thank you so much to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video and my insane ramblings. It really does mean the most. Hope you all check them out. Link is in the description, and we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. After the title card that I mentioned in the intro, we cut to 2 people discussing the state of the German army at the beginning of World War I. As they open the doors and we cut to the street, the tone is quickly established. The German army marching off to war are treated as heroes. Dates and specific battles are never mentioned in this movie for reasons I'll talk about later, but we see that this is taking place at the beginning of the war. A postman delivering mail mentions that tomorrow he'll be going off to be a sergeant in the military. The man he's talking to responds that he will in a few months as well, but the war will probably be over by then. In the meantime, we see women hugging the men as they leave and throwing flowers at them as they march through the streets as a sort of parade. They're playing drums and trumpets to establish the might of these heroes. The entire scene feels like a fairy tale, and it's supposed to. These men are supposed to be depicted as larger than life and untouchable, the way that people of the time wanted to view the heroes of war. Hold these images and the idea of this in your mind for when we see this same street later in the film. We then see a classroom with the windows wide open, listening to the sounds of the parade as the teacher is urging the young men on to enlist now. The teacher speaks of how much these young boys are needed and how the fatherland cannot persist without their sacrifice. He mentions that others are joining as well, and schools have had to be shut down because all of the boys went off to war. The teacher even directly mentions their parents, saying what kind of father would be so selfish as to not give up a son for his nation, and what kind of mother would be too weak to not send a son for her country. The men hearing this begin to envision what their idea of war is. They imagine the cheers and glory they'll receive as these proud warriors stepping out to fight for their people. They imagine the women adoring them and the prestige that comes with enlisting. Then the teacher begins to call on them specifically, asking why certain individuals haven't enlisted yet. One of the boys he points to is named Paul, and he says that Paul is a young writer. Again, the story In the West Nothing New was written by Eric Remarque. However, Paul was his self-insert for the story. So the experience of Paul is the experience that Eric had in World War I. After enough prodding, Paul stands up and says that he will go to fight for his country, and with that, the rest of the class joins in.
I wonder what you are going to do.
I'll go.
I want to go. How about me? Me too. I'm ready. I'm not going to stay home.
They all begin to cheer and shout as the camera cuts between the smiling and yelling faces of the boys and the proud, happy face of their teacher. The boys begin to say things that are laughably and sadly juvenile, like now they don't have to go to class anymore. One boy in the class, a boy by the name of Ben, has not yet decided to enlist. So his friends join around him specifically, and after enough convincing, Ben says that he'll enlist as well. With that, the whole class begins cheering and singing as they throw paper into the air and say they'll march together to go enlist. On the chalkboard behind the professor, there's a few phrases written. One of them is the opening to Homer's Odyssey. Tell me, O Muse, of that ingenious hero who traveled far and wide. Again, mixing with the ideas that these boys have, that they're going to be great heroes who will be sung about and told through the epic poems of history. But after that comes a couple phrases that are harbingers for the story to come. The first reads, resist the first elements of passion. It's too late when you resort to medicine. And a third phrase that appears at the end of the scene says, whatever you do it wisely, and keep in mind your purpose. Again, this introduction shows us the arrogant adventure of war, and how these boys are ready to fight, although they don't yet understand what that means. For many who never fought in World War I, the scene exemplifies their experience of the war. To join is to be a hero, and to fight is righteous. And what sets All Quiet on the Western Front apart from other movies at the time is that this is where the fairy tale ends. The story leads us into that revelation slowly, and for now we get the first hints of it when the boys go to boot camp. Also, I know I haven't really named any of the characters besides Paul. There's like 6 of the boys who are the main characters throughout the story, but if I was to just throw out a bunch of German names right now, would it mean anything to you? So as people become relevant, then I'll give them a name. While in boot camp, the boys are talking about how excited they are to start fighting and to learn bayonet drills or how to shoot a rifle. The first dose of reality comes whenever their former mailman, Himmel, the guy shown in conversation at the introduction of the movie, steps into the bunk as their drill sergeant. At first, the boys treat him the way they treat each other, saying they're happy to see him as a friend. But Himmel, who's all about order and following orders, decides to put them in line. He has them march for hours and hours on end and crawl through the mud on their stomachs. This quickly establishes that the war isn't going to be as fun as they thought it would be. Also, during this time, we start to get a glimpse of how impressive the cinematography and the sets are for this movie. Like in 1930, to get shots like this and coordinate movements of this size is very impressive. I mean, it's impressive by today's standards as well. It's just super impressive for back then. Also, nearly every extra that you see on screen is a real German veteran. Lewis Milestone wanted to ensure that the film had authenticity, so the majority of the training drills and the tactics that you see employed later in the film were taught to him by German soldiers. So in scenes like this, you're just watching Germans do what they did in the war. Because of Himmel's continued strictness, the boys decide to play a prank on him. They catch him out one night, wrap him in a bedcloth, and then throw him in a bunch of mud. Also, this has nothing to do with the overbearing plot or themes of the movie, but the scream Himmel makes when they grab him is hilarious. Like legit, that gets me every time. After this, the boys are sent out to fight and finally begin to make their way to the front lines. Also, this will be my last movie nerd moment for this review. Actually, it won't be at all, but just to do it again. These shots of looking through the window and seeing this group of men walk forward and kind of being detached from the reality they're facing and then cutting back to them in person, it's gorgeous. I love it. Shortly after the boys step off the train, they are met with artillery fire. A soldier unrelated to our main group is killed by the ensuing shrapnel. Ben, who, if you'll remember, was the boy who needed convincing from the rest of his friends, lays by this soldier's side and, despite Paul's urging, has trouble letting go of this fallen comrade. This is the first death that they've seen, and it happened before they even had a chance to fight back. Paul and his group continues until they meet up with the company that they're supposed to join into. This small group of soldiers, who they're essentially refilling, are the survivors of previous battles, meaning Paul and his friends are the recruits stepping in to work with seasoned soldiers. This is made apparent whenever they are very abrasive to Paul when he accidentally sets his stuff at a bunk one of them was already using.
That's me. I'm Lester. And this is where he lives. I didn't know. Well, you know now. Yes. Yes, of course.
The boys remark that they're hungry, and after Paul asks where the food is, the men laugh, saying food's pretty much non-existent out here. Hunger is a reoccurring problem throughout the story, and it becomes apparent that the soldiers are very undersupplied. We see this as the group's only way of achieving food is through my favorite character in the movie, Cat. Cat is not only the group's leader, but you can also tell that he's been through a lot of war and is very much over it at this point. You can see this as the way he gets food for the group is by stealing an entire pig. And then in the following scene, whenever he returns to the group of soldiers, they see him as a superior officer and stand at attention, and Cat gets scared because that hasn't happened in so long and stands at attention with them. Before he tells them that that's stupid and don't do that again. And then whenever Cat's friends see that all he brought back was one pig, he says that he'd wish they'd just die already.
Are you crazy? There ain't enough here for us.
I wish you three'd get bumped off. I'm tired of feeding you for nothing.
Cat is, as you can see, used for a lot of comedic relief, but he's also the cornerstone that the boys use to navigate throughout the film. As terrible things happen, Cat is constantly there to reassure them that it's not their fault and it's just a part of the war. In a weird way, he's sort of our straight man for a lot of the horrors we experience, because if he can witness all of this and still be okay, then maybe the others have a chance as well. After this, the group is deployed for their first job, wiring duty. World War I, for those who aren't familiar, was primarily determined through trench warfare. Along these trenches, barbed wire was continuously placed in order to stop any oncoming attack. Now, you can't do this during the daytime because the potential attackers will, kill you for it. So at night, soldiers would quietly sneak out of the trenches in order to lay barbed wire. As they get off the truck to go to the front lines, there's this shot where several of the boys look back at the truck leaving as a sort of final send-off before their way home is gone forever. Keep this shot in mind for later. On their way to the lines, Cat begins to tell the boys about artillery and what it sounds like and that they shouldn't be afraid of it. Whenever artillery fire begins, all the boys jump to the ground, and Ben, who's already at his wit's end, wets himself. Cat looks at him and says it's okay, that it's happened to better men, and as a matter of fact, it's happened to Cat himself.
Yeah, never mind. It's happened to better men than you. And it's happened to me. When we come back, I'll get you all some nice, clean underwear.
This is what I mean by he's always using his own experience in order to get the boys through it. Something interesting about this scene where they crawl out into the mud in order to lay the wire, the director went to his group of extras, which were essentially all German soldiers, and asked them to teach him how they laid out barbed wire. So these German veterans instructed the cast of how to lay out barbed wire, and several of the extras in the scene are people who did that during the war. And another interesting thing about this scene that holds no real value is this comedically large hammer that I think is very funny. While they're out there, the flare is launched before artillery and gunfire begin. They all make it back to the trench except for Ben, who gets caught out in the field, and he is then blinded by ensuing explosions. And for audiences in the 1930s, who obviously knew that people died in war, but perhaps never considered the harrowing nature of battle, this scene was a shock. As Ben begins to run the wrong direction, he is cut down by gunfire. One of the boys, Kimerick, decides to go save him. After bringing Ben back and laying him in the trench, Kat asks Kimerick why he would do that. Kimerick says that it's his friend, it's Ben, and Kat says it's just a corpse, and definitely not worth your life. This is in stark contrast to everything that the boys had been taught. Sure, they knew that it was possible to die in the war, but even then there was this valor to it, and the idea that everyone is treated as heroes, even in death. But as they stand in front of no man's land, and a field of bodies, both friend and enemy, who no one can bring back home, the valor begins to fade. We then see that the group is staying in a dugout on the front lines, as artillery fire is constant through every hour of every day. The ground rattles and shakes, and there are rats running between their feet. They mention that this has been going on for 5 days, and Kat says 2 more makes a week, and then you can say that you've really been under fire. Again, Kat continues to be the foundation for the rest of the group. An officer steps into the dugout and mentions that 2 other dugouts have been wiped out, which is not what this group wants to hear. The officer's very casual and remarks that he'll try to get the boys some food, as they've been several days without eating. Through the scene, you can see the madness and paranoia on the faces of these men. Things like shell shock and PTSD were just now stepping into the public consciousness. And just as earlier with Ben's death, if you were watching this movie in 1930 and not yet considered the horrors of trench warfare, then this scene would also be a shock. To keep him from screaming and trying to run away, Kat knocks out Kimerick. However, a few moments later, when Kat's distracted, Kimerick tries to make a run for it. He runs through the trenches and tries to go over the top before artillery fire takes him out. He's still alive and is carried behind the lines to a field hospital. After this, we see that the men get a loaf of bread and have to fight over it not only between each other, but the rats in the trench as well. Then shortly after this, and after days of bombardment, the shelling stops, which means that the French are about to attack. The men quickly line up on the trench and place their rifles over the top, waiting for the French to arrive. Some of the shots in this scene of the men in the trenches and the quiet of no man's land are incredible. Scenes like this are really structured like a horror movie. There's this tension that builds up as the men are aiming down their sights in a moment they've waited months for at this point, anticipating the Allies to rise out of their trench and come attack them. Finally, as the French begin to charge, German artillery begins to fire back, and hundreds are killed before they ever get a shot off. There's this scene as Paul is watching this unfold. He sees a French soldier reach up to the barbed wire and wrap his hands around it to try to pull himself up before he is hit by an explosive directly, and whenever the smoke clears, all that's left are his 2 hands gripping the wire. It turns out that this shot came directly from one of the German extras who were working on the movie. While discussing the trench scene, one of the German extras mentions that during the beginning of an engagement, he had watched a French soldier grab onto the barbed wire, get blown up, and all that was left were his hands hanging on the wire. And Louis Milestone felt that this was impactful enough to recreate it in the film. I think about these hands a lot, because there was a real French soldier who fought in World War I who died in an instant, quicker than he could process it, and all that was left of him were his disembodied hands. So a soldier on the enemy side who witnessed that would survive the war and years later speak to an American filmmaker about his hands, and that filmmaker would immortalize those hands forever. All from a soldier who could not have possibly known what his legacy would be. It's bizarre to think about that this soldier, with his final moments in a future he couldn't have possibly envisioned, perhaps did more to fight warfare itself than one soldier ever could have. And of course, the most impactful part is that that is one of millions who died in World War I. and so many bodies left on battlefields that have their own stories to tell. But the idea of these two hands physically above the battlefield, separated from everyone else, and that being the legacy of one life taken of many, there's something about it. The Germans begin to shoot back with belt-fed machine guns and bolt-action rifles. Eventually, the French make their way to the German trenches and begin to engage in hand-to-hand combat. They fight with bayonets and knives and shovels in their fists. In 1930, it was considered pretty obscene to depict someone dying by any manner on camera. And here we have a brutal, violent fight, even by today's standards. The way these men are depicted, men who we've seen both in moments of laughter and terror, now with these grizzled faces as they begin to plunge knives into men whose name they'll never know, is a lot by today's standards, and in 1930, earth-shattering. Because at the time, while the general public loved the idea and the glory of the soldier, they didn't want to think about the brutality of it, or the menacing nature of warfare itself. I mean, it's the same thing by today's standards, right? When's the last time you saw a military recruitment campaign that showed actual warfare? It's always just the cool guy hero shots and college for some reason. Audiences at the time loved the idea of the blood, guts, and glory of war, as long as you leave out the blood and guts, where All Quiet on the Western Front just left out the glory. The Germans evacuate and run from the French before the French are stopped by German artillery fire and the retreat is flipped. There's a shot as the French are shooting at the advancing Germans, and we see a sort of camera track down the trench line as the men are being cut down. And what's important about this scene is it is a direct one-to-one mirror of the same scene we saw depicted when the Germans were shooting the French. The two shots, aside from direction, are nearly identical to each other. It's as if the only difference is the direction they're walking and the uniform they're wearing. As the survivors of the battle are relieved by the advancing cavalry, the men have a moment to rest. From the remains on the battlefield, they cut blood from bread and break open bottles of wine in a moment of rest. The next day, whenever the men get to walk behind lines in order to get some real food, the chef tries to stop them, saying that he's made food for 150 people and asks why only 80 are here. And that's because of the 150 men in the company, only 80 have survived. There's a short fight. Cat threatens to kill the chef, which is pretty standard for him.
The other was fat fool that ever drew a cook wagon. And you're scared of shows. All we want to hear out of you is one more little yip and we'll cut you up and eat you raw.
Before an officer breaks it up and the men get to eat. The men have a conversation about why they're here in the first place. And I understand by today's standards, this isn't anything earth-shattering like, oh, war bad, how controversial. But in 1930, while certainly not a new debate by any means, it certainly wasn't as loud. So when the men say things like,
Me and the Kaiser felt just alike about this war. We didn't either of us want any war, so I'm going home. He's there already.
Somebody must have wanted it. Maybe it was the English. No, I don't want to shoot any Englishmen. I never saw one till I came up here. And I suppose most of them never saw a German till they came up here. No, I'm sure they weren't asked about it.
Well, it must be doing somebody some good. Not me and the Kaiser.
I think maybe the Kaiser wanted a war.
You leave us out of this.
I don't see that. The Kaiser's got everything he needs.
Well, I never had a war before. Every full-grown emperor needs one war to make him famous. Why, that's history.
Yeah, generals too.
They need war. Manufacturers, they get rich.
it goes a long way. Neither side wanted the war, and aside from kings, generals, and businessmen, it seems that no one's winning either. The boys go to see Kimrick. If you'll remember, he's the one who ran out of the trench and was injured by mortar fire before the main battle began. When they get there, Kimrick says that he feels a sharp pain in his foot, but when the men look down, his foot's been amputated. This sends Kimrick into a whirlwind, as he feels he'll never be able to walk the same again. His friend Mueller is immediately like, oh, those are some cool boots you got, since you won't be needing them.
If you're not going to be using these, Franz, why don't you leave them with us? What good are they to you? I can use them. My boots give me blister after blister.
And while that may sound very cold to say to someone who just lost a foot, it's more so the boyish ignorance that these kids have. He doesn't recognize the psychological damage or the weight of what's happening. He's just a kid who likes his friend's boots. Paul stays by Kemmerich's side, and after remarking that Kemmerich will get better,
I don't think so.
Kemmerich says that he won't, and to give his boots to Mueller and send his watch back home. Paul tries to get a doctor to help, saying that the patient with an amputation is in trouble. The doctor remarks that he's done over a dozen amputations today, and he's got another one to go do right now. People are dying constantly. To the hospital, Kemmerich's another cot that needs to be refilled. And whenever we see Paul leave the hospital while holding Kemmerich's boots, we know that Kemmerich didn't make it. There's this interesting series of shots where we see that Mueller gets the boots, and while wearing them, he gets killed. We then see the boots go on to another soldier, and then while wearing them, he gets killed. And it's not to say that perhaps the boots are some bad omen, at least not directly, but more so just the idea that these soldiers keep dying and their equipment's lasting longer than they are. It's just to show that boys keep dying and the war keeps marching on. While the group is again in another dugout, we hear that a man got a letter from his wife at home and begins to feel homesick that a woman shouldn't have to take care of a farm by herself, and he really wants to get back to her. Keep this guy in mind for later. At the same time, Himmel, the drill sergeant and previous mailman from the beginning of the movie, shows up to the trenches. This is his first time on the front lines. And here, as soon as he tries his whole bossy stand at attention thing, they don't care for it.
Who was your friend?
Would somebody get General Ludendorff a nice, comfortable chair?
Come on, George, you're superior officer. Do you want to be caught by some base?
I do. It's going to be a big attack tonight, and I just love to get out of it.
Will you obey my orders?
Kiss my butt. It isn't customary to ask for salutes here. I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to attack a town that we tried to take once before. Many killed and many wounded. It's great fun. This time you're going with us. If any of us stops a bullet, or we die, we're going to come to you, click our heels together and ask stiffly, please, Sergeant Himmelstoss, may we go?
You'll pay for this. You.
The next day during battle, Paul begins to smile at Himmel, knowing that he's now going to have to face combat. And sure enough, as gunfire begins and they charge forward, Himmel gets scared and cowers in a trench. Paul begins to tell him to get up and fight, and Himmel makes more funny noises.
You yellow rat. Yellow rat.
Until an officer who's running nearby tells them to push forward. And surprisingly, having now an official order, Himmel agrees and pushes on. It's weird, this moment of character. I expected Himmel to just kind of be the comedic relief as an overly strict sergeant, but after this scene, it's almost as if that was Himmel's comfort. The reason he was so strict and overbearing is because war is horrible, and the thing he relied on, just as the men rely on Cat, is a superior officer's order and just following protocol. So here he gets this kind of pseudo-courage because that's what the orders tell him to do. And as Himmel runs forward, he's cut down by gunfire. They continue to push forward until, like the French earlier, they're stopped by artillery fire and forced to retreat. During this retreat, Paul falls into a foxhole and gets separated from his men. As the French begin to push beyond his position, he hides in the foxhole hoping none will see him. That is until the French begin to retreat and a soldier falls into the foxhole with Paul. During a quick fight, Paul pulls a knife and stabs the Frenchman, keeping him quiet so that none other can hear. After this, there's this weird moment of clarity with Paul where he realizes he's just taken someone's life in such an up-close and direct fashion. He goes down to the water in the trench and begins to physically wash the blood from his hands. However, the French soldier does not die right away and instead bleeds throughout the night. Paul begins to try to talk to him and says that he's sorry. He had to stab him. That's just what he's supposed to do. Paul begins to try to help him. He goes down into the water and tries to filter it to get the man a drink. Paul becomes tortured by this. He starts yelling at the man that he should just go ahead and die, and why is he making Paul suffer? Eventually, the soldier finally dies, and Paul is broken. He begins to ask for his forgiveness, and says that if it wasn't for the uniforms, the two could be friends.
Oh, God, why did they do this to us? We only wanted to live, you and I. Why should they send us out to fight each other? If we threw away these rifles and these uniforms, you could be my brother, just like Cat and Albert.
He searches the man's coat and finds his wallet and a picture of his family. Paul begins to lay at the dead man's feet and beg forgiveness, saying after the war he'll take care of the man's wife, and parents, and children. Paul feels broken, as he's never had to kill a man up close and then watches he slowly die. Another interesting thing about this scene is the actor who played the French soldier was named Raymond Griffith, and this was the final movie of his career. Raymond was mute, which adds another layer to this scene, as it's not only the language barrier that divides the two men, but the fact that the actor playing the soldier literally cannot speak to Paul. Raymond played in several silent films during his career, and with the new invention of talkies, or movies with audio, he was beginning to lose his stardom. So for his final role, he played a soldier from an opposing faction who can never hope to speak to his killer in the first place. Paul eventually makes his way back to his own lines, and while telling Kat of what happened, Kat says it's okay, and it's just because he had to kill someone for the first time, and it's not his fault, and hey, that's just war. The men have a few days to rest and go to a bar. While at the bar, Paul and his friends begin talking about women and how it would sure be cool to see a few. The next day, while bathing in the river, they see a group of women walking on the bank across from them. The men try to coax the women into the water, and after the women aren't interested, they decide to show them that they have food, and then the women want them to come over. It's not mentioned a lot, but this is a hint of the position that the French civilians are in during the war. The war hurt everyone, and those near the battlefield, just as the soldiers, had nothing to eat. After a guard tells the men they can't cross to the other bank, the women ask them to sneak out later that night. Also, during this bathing scene, the men are fully naked, and while nothing's shown in the movie because all the sensitive parts are below water, that was considered like blasphemy in 1930. Like, this movie got blasted by a lot of groups, which we'll talk about. And one of the reasons it was blasted in the US was for this and the scene that immediately follows. Also, while talking about things that were controversial but also funny, there's this one guy in the group named Jodin. He's one of Kat's men who's a seasoned soldier, so not part of the main group of boys. He was in the war before them. Apparently they filmed a series of comedic shorts with Jodin, like in character, in World War I, just doing comedic stuff because audiences liked him so much. And next to Kat, he is my favorite character in the film. So that night, the men sneak out, again naked, to go see the French women, and after the women give them clothes to wear, they give the women the food, and the women are very excited to see the food, and then they romance the women. Now, nothing is shown, there's nothing explicitly said either, but what we get is a shot of an open doorway with the shadow of a bed frame cast onto the wall as Paul explains to this woman how important she is to them, and the fact that they can't even speak the same language doesn't deter from the fact that he'll remember her forever. Now, this was over the moon for 1930. During this time, you never showed men and women the hand-holding, for that matter, much less the implication of an unmarried man taking this French woman to bed. The Flintstones was considered controversial because it depicted Fred and Wilma in the same bed. Not doing anything in bed, just the concept of a husband and wife having one bed instead of two. So this scene was a lot, but it is again accurate to the experience of several soldiers. These boys want to carry out the dreams they've had for the rest of their life, like being with women. And despite seeking comfort, the only women they could be with are ones who can never possibly understand them. And this scene, while maybe not comfortable for audiences at the time, was certainly accurate. The next day, as they begin to march out into battle, they're attacked by artillery fire, and for the first time, Paul is injured by shrapnel. He's also injured alongside his friend Albert, and the two of them go to a Catholic hospital. While there, a man named Hammaker, who's been in the hospital for a while, explains to them that as soon as someone dies or is close to death, they immediately move them from the bed and take their clothes so that they can put someone in their place. Because the battlefield never has a shortage of dying men. This is shown as when a man collapses, within seconds, the orderlies have already remade the bed. Paul's friend Albert has both of his legs amputated, and as he struggles to come to terms with this, Paul is sent home on leave. As Paul goes home, he's certainly a different man from the one who left. He's now disillusioned and broken from the things he's seen. Remember that street we saw earlier with the parade and cheering women as these proud heroes march off to war? Well, here's that street now. Businesses going under as the economy begins to collapse, and a child playing with a soldier's kit. As Paul gets home, he's greeted by his sister, and then wishes to see his mother, who's become very ill. There's something about this scene as Paul comes home to his mother, and I don't know if they told Beryl Mercer, the actress who plays Paul's mother, if this was her son, or if she's to act like it's her son returning from war, but man, her performance gets me.
Here I am crying instead of being glad. Ernest, get down the jar of blackberries. You still like them, don't you?
There's this melancholy to the entire time Paul's home, where despite being in his old house and wearing his old clothes, he's not the same boy who last put them on. This is emphasized whenever Paul goes to eat with his father and his father's friends. Among them is the teacher who convinced Paul and his friends to go enlist. As they toast him and talk about his valor in the war, the teacher begins to say how marvelous it is that he's a soldier fighting for the fatherland. There's also this really quick mention that says a lot without saying a lot that I appreciate. As the teacher is talking to Paul, he says this.
After all, they do at least get decent food out there. Actually, it's worse here. Actually, but the best for our soldiers all the time. That's our motto. The best for our soldiers. Best for our soldiers.
But as we know, the soldiers have barely anything to eat at all, and what they do get is scraps and leftovers. Because the people back home, whose country is falling apart, are being told that no, it's not because we can't supply food, it's just because we give the best to our boys on the front lines. But as we know, there is no best. This is all there is. And the propaganda that these people believe is that they are suffering for the betterment of others. And the people on the front lines believe that they are suffering for the betterment of others. But in actuality, everyone's suffering together. As they're talking, the teacher begins to pull out maps of the battlefield and immediately begin wargaming to Paul, talking about what the army needs to do in order to win the war. And as Paul begins to say that this is the last thing he wants to hear about, and how terrible battling on the front lines really is, the teacher begins to tell him, well, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, sure, you know the battle and warfare, but I'm actually smart and have read books, so therefore I know how this war's supposed to play out. And then from that, all of the men, besides Paul, begin arguing what the best strategy of the German army really is. And as they begin to yell and shout, Paul just gets up and leaves, and they don't even notice. Like I said, Paul is used to show the experiences of the author, Eric Remarque. And while everything that Paul's seen is a conglomeration of Eric's own experience and the experience of other veterans, as mentioned like with the hands on the barbed wire earlier, Eric particularly talked about how whenever he got home, the men would constantly be pressing him to talk about how great war is. And whenever he would answer with the horrors of war, they would say, oh, well, you just don't know what you're talking about then. And while it's easy to condemn these people for their ignorance in the face of reality, and the story does here in just a moment with the teacher, but this is the same mindset that the boys had setting off to war. It took a lot of death and a lot of heartbreak for them to realize how brutal warfare really is. The movie never has a moment where it sits down and looks at the camera and says, war is always immoral, and if you ever fight anyone for any reason, that's bad. Instead, it serves as a warning for mindlessly sending boys out to die in someone else's war. And it does that simply by just portraying stories that soldiers experience. That opening sequence at the beginning, this is not a condemnation or a confession. Steven Spielberg once said that all war movies are inherently anti-war. And while I believe the truth is a bit more nuanced to that, there is truth in that, because simply showing warfare is the biggest proponent against it. The next day, as Paul is walking through town, the teacher asks Paul to come speak to a group of boys about how great the war is and how they should all join up in order to save the fatherland. And when Paul gets there, he does not do that.
I can't tell you anything you don't know. We live in the trenches out there. We fight. We try not to be killed. Sometimes we are. That's all.
No. No, Paul. I've been there. I know what it's like. That's not what fun builds on, Paul.
I forget. You're reciting that same old stuff. Making more Iron Men. More young heroes. You still think it's beautiful and sweet to die for your country, don't you? We used to think you knew. The first bombardment taught us better. It's dirt and pain to die for your country. When it comes to dying for your country, it's better not to die at all. There are millions out there dying for their country. And what good is it?
Paul!
You asked me to tell them how much they're needed out there. He tells you, go out and die. No, but if you'll pardon me, it's easier to say go out and die than it is to do it. And it's easier to say it than to watch it happen.
While looking in the faces of these young kids who were in the same position that Paul was a few years ago, Paul says that he needs to get back to the front lines right now because he needs to fight so that more of them aren't needed. That night, his mom sets up with him, asking him not to go back and how he needs to be careful and get a job behind the lines so he doesn't have to be in danger. And it's, man, it's a lot. But Paul is not the same boy who left her years ago. He's now a different man who is determined to fight so that others don't have to. The next day, after Paul returns to the front lines, he comes to find that no one he knew is still there, meaning more than likely, they've all been killed in one battle or the other. As a matter of fact, the boy out front is only 16 years old. So just as in the beginning of the film, whenever Kat and Jodin had Paul and his friends come in as replacements, now Paul is the seasoned warrior who is having more children come in to back him up. But as Paul is sitting there, sure enough, Jodin walks back in and the two are reunited. Jodin was out looking for food, so Paul begins to ask him of everyone who was there when he left. Westus, one of his friends, died while trying to save a wounded messenger dog.
Where's Westus? Messenger dog was wounded. He went out to get it.
And the man who earlier missed his wife and his farm back home attempted to desert but was caught by the German army.
Where's Dietrich? He got homesick. You remember about the cherry blossom? I guess he never got over that. He started out one night to go home and help his wife with the farm. They got him behind the lines. We never heard of him since. He was just homesick, but probably they couldn't see it that way.
But thankfully for Paul, Kat is still alive, and Jodin mentions that if Kat were to die, they'd probably have to call the war off. Paul asks where Kat is, and Jodin mentions the direction he is, saying that he's out looking for food. The two are reunited, and Paul begins to tell Kat of how he now feels like a stranger back home, and the war's really all he has left.
Tell me, Paul. How's it at home? Have a good leave?
In spots.
What's the matter?
Oh, I'm no good for back there anymore, Cat. None of us are. We've been in this too long. The young men thought I was a coward because I told them that we learned that death is stronger than duty one's country. The old men said, go on, push on to Paris. My father even wanted me to wear my uniform around. It's not home back there anymore. All I could think of was, I'd like to get back and see Cat again. You're all I've got left, Cat.
I'm not much to have left. I missed you, Paul.
Kat begins to talk and mentions that it seems like the war should be over, and it doesn't seem they've got a lot of fight left in them.
Push on to Paris. You want to see what they've got on the other side. They eat white bread over there. They've got dozens of airplanes to all one, and tanks that'll do over anything. What have we got?
Guns so warm they drop shells on our own men. No food, no ammunition, no orders. Push on them. So that's the way they talk back there.
But that regardless of what happens, they've got each other and they'll stick by each other's side. As they begin to walk back, a bomber flies overhead and drops an explosive. A piece of it hits Cat in the leg, and Cat's now unable to walk, so Paul begins to carry him. As Paul is carrying Cat, a second bomb is dropped, and this one seems to not harm either of them. But little known to Paul at the time, a piece of shrapnel struck Cat in the neck. And whenever Paul makes his way back to the field hospital, he finds that Cat is dead. Cat was Paul's final connection back to all of this. He hates the war and he doesn't fit in at home. And Cat was his friend. He was a man that he was close to, and really his only foundation that he had left to keep running on. So now, as Paul is stationed on the front line, it seems that everything's just kind of pointless. So one day, while waiting out on the front for something to happen, Paul sees a butterfly land just outside of the trench in front of him. Paul stands up and reaches out a hand to try to pick up this butterfly, and as he does, a French sniper spots him. And as Paul reaches forward, a gunshot rings out and his hand falls to the earth. We now have our final shot of the film, as we see the scene from earlier where the boys looked back at the truck leaving them as they stepped out on their first deployment, now overlaid with the graves of those who died in World War I. Every face who looked back, now lying among the dead. All these stories, all of these personalities and people we once knew, now among the white crosses in a field in France. And with that, we have the ending of All Quiet on the Western Front. As I mentioned earlier, the experiences of this story are based on the perspective of the author Eric. And obviously Eric didn't die in the war as he had to write the book, but this send-off to the character is how one of many deaths could have occurred. The title of the story comes from something that Eric read while he was at home while on leave. In the newspaper, he was reading updates about the war, and the paper was talking about Germany's great victories on the Eastern Front and how great the war was going, and then concluded by saying, in the West, nothing new. Although Eric knew this was not true, he had watched several of his friends die and battles raged on and knew that Germany was losing. So in order to keep morale high and in order to make the people think that it still means something and to push forward, rather than saying all of that, the paper simply said, in the West, nothing new. And with that, Eric is showing how the entire war effort, the lives and stories of these men were demolished in an instant between artillery fire and trench warfare, and how their deaths amounted to cannon fodder. It was always someone else's war, and they were just the pawns fighting it. And while we experience these characters, while we know Paul's relationship with his mother and his personal inner turmoil over the war, and how all of this led to his death, that doesn't matter, because he's just one of many. And as far as the people need to know, it's all quiet on the Western Front. Now, as mentioned, when this movie came out, in the United States, there were various groups who didn't like the violence and, the mentioned kith content. It was critically acclaimed, and several viewed the violence and graphic scenes depicted as necessary for getting across the movie's point. As a matter of fact, in 1931, the movie became the first film to win both the Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars. And to this day, it's gone down in history as one of the greatest American films ever made. However, at the time, especially in Europe, this wasn't the case. In Germany, in the early 30s, several nationalists who would eventually go on to be a part of the Nazi Party would storm the screenings of the film and begin releasing rats or throwing stink bombs into the audience. The movie was considered anti-German by them because it depicted the deterioration and eventual loss of the German military. Whenever the Nazi Party came to power, the book and the film were outright banned. However, in the early 30s, in countries like Switzerland and France, the movie would show to packed houses, and trains would take people from Germany into other countries so that they could watch the film. Lou Ayres, the actor who played Paul in the film, was a conscientious objector during World War II. Because of that, several of his movies were banned from playing in theaters in the United States. Eventually, Lew would join the medical corps and served as a medic in the Pacific Theater and was under fire on several occasions. When speaking of this, Lew would say, "To me, war was the greatest sin. I couldn't bring myself to kill other men." During World War II, as I mentioned, the film was banned in Germany for being anti-German, and ironically, was banned in Poland for being pro-German. It should also be mentioned that the American military, who was asked to help out with several of the scenes in the movie and the sets, did not cooperate because, again, seen as pro-German. And I think that kind of proves the movie did what it tried to do. Every side, or at least every militaristic side, didn't want to claim it, saying that it didn't outline the points they wanted to, or didn't represent what they wanted to, or blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, those who were pushing for war or wanted war didn't want anything to do with it, because it messed with their narrative. And of course, the ideas of war being terrible and we shouldn't send our sons to die for our quarrels wasn't anything new, but this was a new way to say it. Wilfred Owen, a British soldier during World War I, wrote several poems about his time in the military. And one of those poems, Dulce et decorum est, fits with this movie's thesis. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to drudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores of innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell them with such high zest, to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Like I said, All Quiet on the Western Front isn't saying anything new. It's just saying it a lot louder than some others can. And there's several anti-war films that depict warfare in its brutality, that go on to do the same things and different things than what this movie did. Films like Come and See take war and put it in a subjective lens, viewing it through the eyes of one boy who is suffering as war toils around him. Full Metal Jacket takes several angles, looks at different men, and sees what their own suffering is, and the different situations and turmoil that can happen because of the effects of war. And as a matter of fact, they are remaking All Quiet on the Western Front, and it's actually supposed to be out next month. This time, the film is being made entirely in German and starring German actors in the lead role. And while I am excited for it, and it does look pretty good from the trailers I've seen, there's something about people who were really there, putting together a movie about what really happened to people who didn't really understand or didn't want to understand at the time. And one of the reasons this movie is considered so disturbing and so important by myself and many others is we rarely get the chance to see people who were really there put their experience to film. But not only that, they made something greater out of it. If Spielberg's right, and it truly is anti-war to simply show warfare, then these filmmakers certainly did the job. And through their tales, the movie depicted a brutality unknown to many of the time. Again, I keep thinking about the hands of that unnamed soldier, and a legacy that would supersede him for a century to come. Whenever I speak about a lot of these old war stories, I say that I feel it's important that these stories be remembered and that these tales live on through us and beyond us. And it seems that myself and the movie would agree on that. And it's for that reason I think it's important to share. And hopefully if you stuck around this long, you think it's important, or at least think it's kind of cool, and I do too, and that's really cool. And I just want to say thank you for watching. I love this film a lot, if you couldn't tell. I remember whenever I had heard about it a lot, just like, oh, it's the anti-war film, you have to watch it. And after I watched it for the first time, I decided I have to make a video on this. So if you stuck around this long, hopefully you agree. Like I said, I really love this movie a lot, and I think it deserves to be remembered. But that's enough talking about that. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate your all support in watching me talk about a black and white movie that none of us were alive for the making of. So you all are really cool, and I appreciate it. Unless there's someone who's like 91 watching this right now, in which case you're fantastic. Thank you for being here. But yeah, I love this movie a lot. I greatly appreciate what it did, and I just thought it was worth sharing with you all. So thank you for watching once again. Thank you for the support on the last video. So for those who probably don't know, I botched the upload to the Frankenstein film, or the Frankenstein video. My head's buzz so much watching movies for days on end. I know how terrible of a life I have. Really, thank you all for the opportunity to do this, make videos like this. But I botched the Frankenstein upload because I tried to make it a premiere, because YouTube's like, oh, premieres will help engage audience. So I'm like, okay, I'll try it, and it ruined it. In like the time period when my videos normally get like 400,000, 500,000 views, it had 40,000. So I'm like, okay, I'll just try re-upload. But then that messed with the algorithm because it was like a double upload or whatever. And I was just like, well, I guess this video is trash. Good job, me. But then you all continue to show support. I think it's around like 600,000 now. So it's really cool that after I thought I had just like ruined a video, that you all still showed up and supported it. And that means a lot. So thank you for watching that. And if you don't know, because again, I messed with the whole thing, there's a Frankenstein video, the video before this one on my channel. And I thought it was pretty cool. So if you want to check that out, do it. And again, just thank you for being here. We are at 1.83 million subscribers, less than 200,000 from 2 million. You guys are a blessing. You really mean the most. Thank you. So on that note, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Spooky season's coming up, and I've got some spooky topics that will hopefully be pretty cool. Hopefully you'll enjoy. So look forward to that. But for now, I believe that should do it. So I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Girl, it's just gonna be a one night stand. Like, it's just so funny. She's like,
before that.
I love you, but I'm never gonna see you. Like, I just love it.
When their older friend dives into the lake and pulls out bread.
Where'd that come from?
What you know, Steven?
What? No, Steven wants to know. He does want to know.
Like, a bottle, maybe scored I had it. The bread, and they're still excited that the bread from the muddy lake is ready for them. I was like, bleh.
Yeah, but I guess.
Whenever there's a big war coming on, you should rope off a big field and sell tickets. Yeah. And on the big day, you should take all the kings and their cabinet and their generals, put them in the center, dressed in their underpants, and let them fight it out with clubs. The best country wins.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Chicago Cinephiles podcast. I am your co-host, Daniel. Joining me, as always, is the wonderful James and the wonderful Steven. Fellas, how we doing today?
Cold. Very cold.
Like my heart.
Yeah, not ground. Yeah. Oh, God, it's so cold outside. I usually enjoy
New
it.
Year, new cold.
It's bad. I mean, it really is. It's bone-chilling me out there, you know. Walk outside and oh my Lord. And there's nobody on the trains here in Chicago right now. There's nobody. I mean, it's just dead. Downtown is dead, and it's very interesting to travel these days. It's like it looking like identical in the north, getting on a train, so very strange.
Well, we want to wish everyone a happy new year. We're kicking off the new season, new year, with a very touching and wonderful movie.
Very uplifting.
For those of you that are new here, welcome. For those returning back, welcome back. This is the Chicago Cinephiles podcast. We're back on our trail of hitting the movies where they were Oscar winners, and this week we had the 1930 winner, All Quiet on the Western Front. What we do is we kind of talk about a little brief summary of it, kind of go over some major points, and at the end we decide should it have won or not. If not, we kind of give our opinion. So it's not really a spoiler. I mean, some of the stuff may be spoilers, so hang it. But if it's this is definitely a podcast meant to watch after you watch the movie. So please do consider that. But with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into it. So, as I mentioned, we are doing All Quiet on the Western Front. It was based on I'm going to butcher this guy's name. It was based on the 1929 novel of the same name by German novelist Erich Maria Remarque, produced by, and the film was produced by Universal Studios. It was released April 21st, 1931. And again, forgive me some of these names I'm probably going to mispronounce. We have the stars. We have Louis, I want to say like Wellham or Volham. I don't know. He's Corporal Cap. We have Lou Ayers. What a cool name, Lou, as Paul Ballmer. We have John Ray as Himmelstoss. And we have Ben Alexander as Franz Kemmerich. There's more, but that was just kind of the few that were on the poster. So I like to do those. It had a budget of $1.2 million, and it made about $3 million. When AFI, American Film Institute, put their first list of 100 films in 100 years in 1997, it was on there, and then a decade later, it was still on there, which is pretty awesome. In 1990, it was selected by Congress, by the Library of Congress National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. So it's got some pretty good awards behind it. Obviously, it won Best Picture too, obviously. But without further ado, now we're gonna let Steven take over and give us a quick summary as best he can, because this is a long movie, and then we'll go from there. Steven, take it away.
No, I just did a very quick summary because what do you do with this movie? Oh my gosh, it's just epic. I mean, but All Quiet on the Western Front follows Paul Ballmer, a gifted young German student who eagerly enlists in World War I after being inspired by patriotic speeches from his teacher. Along with his classmates, Paul quickly discovers that the reality of trench warfare is brutal, chaotic, and dehumanizing. The young men endure constant shelling, crippling hunger and fear, and the loss of not only their close friends, but also their youth and innocence. As the war drags on, the idealism that brought Paul to the war is completely stripped away, replaced by numbness and despair. When he briefly returns home on leave, he feels alienated from civilians who still glorify the war. When Paul returns to the front, the senseless killing continues, proving that the true victims of war are the young lives destroyed by conflict. Ta-da!
Fantastic. Thank you, Steven.
Happy New Year, everybody. So, you know.
I mean, if you want to do a little bit of positive, we can say we're not in trenches at least. Although the L train can get that.
Well,
but,
the Green Line on certain nights.
Right. Alrighty. So now what we do is we hop into some questions. As you know, we'll hop into some, kind of go over just some questions. Going to talk about what happened during that year as well, because that may have influenced why it won. Surprisingly, there wasn't a lot going on this year. Only had a few things, so we should have some good fun facts for everybody. So in February, Pluto was discovered, and I still think it's a planet. I don't care what you say.
Yeah, please, it's a planet.
Right?
It's
like
planet.
I will always call it a planet.
Scientifically, it's
You're
not.
not going to mess up, what is it, Interplanet Janet, the song from Schoolhouse Rock, but God having Pluto. Come on, screw up the whole song. It'd be weird.
In May, Clint Eastwood was born. That kind of shows you how crazy, like, old he is in this movie. Like,
Never opened his eyes since. Not
yeah. Maybe that's why, because when it came out, the lights from the surgery was so bright, he was like,
don't hit me.
man, I day punk. In July, just the preliminary work began on the Hoover Dam. Also in July, just because this is relevant, because in 2026 the USA is hosting the World Cup. The first World Cup tournament actually began, so it's kind of interesting that it's tied to that.
Hey, wait, the U.S. had the first World Cup? Or
No,
was it-
we have it now, like this year.
Oh, okay. I thought the first World Cup was here. I was like, that's
No, I was just saying, like, in
Okay.
honor of the first World Cup. All right, and that's really it. It was a lot of, like, random,
Wow,
like,
that was great.
it was a lot of, like, random stuff, you know what I
Great
mean? Like,
Depression time.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, basically. But all right, well, without further ado, let's hop into some fun facts as much as we can. So, fellas, take it away.
What do you got, Mr. James? What do you got?
I have a longer one,
Oh.
but if you would like me to start it with, it's,
Go back,
it,
go back.
you know. Okay, so 1930s. I know this movie's about World War One,
But.
the Nazis. So when this movie was being shown in Germany,
Yeah.
yeah, so a bunch of what I will say, I guess, Nazi rabble rousers
Can't say that word,
stormed. No,
Steven.
no, whatever. Well, they stormed the screening in the 1930s and threw stink bombs, threatened theaters, all of that fun stuff. She kind of disrupted. First night went off the hitch, but the second night, and then it kept going until basically the Weimar Republic kind of capitulated to the demands of the brown shirts and would then, of course, banned it. So it was 6 days of protests, workless, parades, marching. It was quite a bit, and then there were chants that weren't very politically correct or nice. And so, yeah, it did kind of escalate, and they did eventually ban it. Now, the German guy who, ran the Universal Studios, who was German, who was from Germany, did a 1,000-word telegram. He paid for that for the German press. I am amazed that all quiet on the Western Front should be threatened with hostility and misunderstanding a country that benefits most from it. Because this does kind of humanize the German side of this movie, spoiler alert. He regarded this film has done more establishing goodwill towards the German people than any factor since the armistice. So, like, the owner of Universal Studio was offended that it was so anti-scene in Germany, but
No. I
fun
can
facts
understand
about
that.
it.
I can see that because although it humanizes the Germans, we're talking about isolationism. In America, no one wants to. We're not going to want to enter this war. If you show this movie, I can sort of see what they're saying. It's going to give a very bad light to entering a war. I mean, we're a decade away from World War II, but still, I can sort of see what they're saying. Not the Germans, but other countries that didn't want to have this movie. It's
Oh, no,
very,
I get it.
very anti-war. Very.
It's very anti-war, and it
But
gives
it's
the other
true.
side a humanized
Mhm.
side of it. Like,
It reminds me of what Harvey Fierstein said about this famous director of West Side Story who directed all other musicals. Someone said in Harvey's book he comes off very badly. And Harvey said that's because I knew him. I mean, this is war. This is what it's like. So you can say it depicts it. No, this is war. This is people blowing up people. The thing that the fun fact that really struck me, because I was struck by the scene. I don't know if you all saw this or it hits you at all, but one of the many where they're sort of the people are coming, the French are approaching them, and they're sort of mowing them down with machine guns. There's a guy who is grabbing the barbed wire, and a grenade hits him. And when the smoke clears, there's a hand holding the grenade, holding the barbed wire still there. The body hangs. And it was so disturbing to me. Well, that scene was described to the director by an extra who was in World War I. He'd seen that happen. He'd seen a French soldier going to attack and then in that position and hanging onto barbed wire like that. So that was in his memory from the war. And I thought for 1930, wow, did they really?
Base code, baby.
I mean, it just you can say a lot about this film, and there's a lot of your monkey's uncle and all that kind of stuff. But some of those shots were just gruesome, and that's the one that really hit me. Like seeing those hands, and it wasn't they were cut off. You knew there was a body hanging from them. It was just, and that really happened. So. I think there's a lot of things like that in this movie that look sort of, and also that this is the first talkie to win the Academy Awards.
Yep.
First talkie. Well, take that, jazz singer. So, what else do you have, Mr. J? Anything else?
Well, the screening of the movie was so like all the border towns. They actually had special trains for like the German people to go back and forth to actually go see this movie because it was internally popular when you were like. I guess that political side of Germany, without going too in the weeds. But one thing that I found interesting is the director wanted so authenticity. He actually looked for German World War I veterans that relocated in LA and sourced them just to make sure the uniforms were correct, trenches, all of that stuff. And he was so dedicated to the realism that the sanitation department came out and said, these trenches are disgusting. We need to clean this crap up because people are going to get real sick because he was that into the authenticity of it. So, I thought that was amazing.
There are two other connections that I think are pretty funny for us, for Chicago especially, one for Chicago. Because of his experience playing Paul, Blue Ayers became a conscientious objector during World War II. And because of this, his films were banned in over 100 Chicago theaters.
Wow.
Yeah. Over 100. And the other thing that makes me laugh about this is the connection back to the man who came to dinner. When Bette Davis was coming in talking about his heart being in love with whatever, he said, stop acting like Zazu Pitts. Well, originally Zazu Pitts was cast as the mother. And because she was such a wacky kind of actress, when audiences saw her, they began to laugh. So they had to recast the whole thing because that's not what we want. So it's sort of like I don't know if anybody knows the story, but when Cher first was cast in Silkwood, she and her sister went to go watch the trailer. So they paid for a movie, sit in the back, and there's Meryl Streep, and then it says Cher, and everyone started laughing. And she was so upset by it. She called Maggie Nichols and she said, they're all laughing. She goes, let them laugh at the trailer. When they see the movie, they're not going to laugh anymore. And then two movies later, she wins an Oscar. She was nominated for an Oscar. So it's very similar, but Zazu didn't stay with it. She was cut. I just love saying Zazu Pitts. I don't know about you.
Well, just like Zazu Pitts, let's cut this and let's move on to the next. So,
acting like Zazu Pitts.
Had you guys ever seen this movie or read the book?
Nope.
I guess that's one benefit of being having a history degree or whatever, is that I both read the book and studied it in my World War I class. Wow. And I've also watched the 2022 version. I never seen the 1930 version. So this was, so what was y'all's initial thoughts?
1970 version.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. So what was y'all's initial thoughts going into the movie? Like, what expectations did you guys have?
Not looking forward to watching it the weekend of New Year's Eve, I'll tell you that right. I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun one. But I was unsure. I mean, I really didn't know anything about the story. Kind of it was about World War I, but that's about it. What about you, James?
I had no, I've heard of, book and I've heard of this movie, but, I had not seen it, and I was thinking, Well, it can either be. I thought it was either going to be really, really good or really, really terrible. That was my initial impression of it.
That's kind of what they are in the 30s, like judging by what we've watched so far.
Yeah. Like so, that was my initial.
I would say that means it's great either way. If you hate it,
you got an opinion, yeah.
If you leave
like the 30s, there's no in between.
But that makes it great art. Period. If you leave any show going, that was nice, want to have a drink? If you don't think about it afterwards, if you have the reaction to go, God, that was the war. Didn't have a reaction. I kind of like that. Not that it's bad, just made you go, oh. There are pieces of that. There are pieces of that 30s kind of filmmaking in this, but there's also this really looking forward in filmmaking in this film. I mean, God almighty, some of those, like the opening, I was like, the cinematographer really likes to look at vistas through a door. I mean, there's so many shots of looking through a door at the outside. So many of those. But it's very forward.
All right, so let's hop into the movie now. So, how important do you guys think that peer pressure and propaganda was in getting the boys to sign up?
100%. 100%. I want to punch the teacher in the face. I mean, because just as the speech goes on, you go, dude, really? Because it goes from would you be to are you not going to stand up? I mean, you're the old man. Did you ever do this? Have you ever done this? Who are you to say that we should do this? It just made me so angry. And I got the feeling that, as I said to Daniel yesterday, if I was with the parents of these boys who had gone and signed up for war, wow, would I be in? Because they're in school. I mean, I don't know if they had to. There's no draft here, right, Dan?
No, not this early.
Voluntarily.
Not this early, there wasn't. But there's more to it. Like, you're looking at 2025 view, but James, go ahead.
Kat says when they dinner, one of these days I'm going to cut one of you boys open and find out what makes you leave school to come to this war. Right at the beginning, I was like, well, he's right. So what about you? I mean...
So, like, I'm sure Daniel probably knows way more about World War I than I do. But this was a transitional war. So, like, back in the day, like, they all thought they were going to be home before Christmas. Like, they did not think this was going to be this long, protracted war that would last years and kill millions upon millions of men. Like, I don't know, like, I know this is Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast. He did this amazing talk about World War I, and he would read some of the letters, and it's like, oh, they're like in the beginning of the war, oh, we took some of their guys, we took them, we licked, but we'll be down back before Christmas. Like, so like, at the end of this war, yes, we now have the modern sense that all war is terrible, but at the back of the day, it wasn't considered like, it was like an honorable thing.
The same thing could be said for the Civil War. I mean, the South thought this would be over in a few weeks. I mean, and I remember hearing that about, not just about the Gulf War, but about, when we went to attack Iraq and done, all this will be over in no time. I mean, there's that sense, I feel like there's always that sense of war, where we got this, it will be over in no time, and yet, no, this is war. This is going to go on and on. I see what you're saying, but just that horrible propaganda. And I guess there's a thought that propaganda really only began with Goebbels in Germany. No, propaganda began a lot of fronts.
Well, this is just peer pressure. This is not propaganda. There's a difference.
But you're true. But it's so maddening. It really upset me to go, wow.
Well, I'll share a little bit of just historical context. Is like James said, this was a trend. Like, if you look, so to answer your question, the teacher probably was in the Franco-Prussian Wars or the Bismarck War, like similar to that, probably. So he probably was in War A to begin with. However, it was a very honorable, if you can use that word, war, in the sense of they didn't dig in trenches and try to get an inch, like, oh, we made it 7 feet today, congrats. I don't fault him for his patriotism because, like you said, one, he thought it was going to be over. Two, his experience of the war was great. And it was early enough to where they hadn't had, like, reports come back that it was terrible. Like James said, the letters were basically saying, like, and part of that was probably because they were silenced by the government, too, obviously, the letters. So I think he blind. Now, do I think he peer pressured too much? Yes. At the end of the day, you should make your own decision. But I mean, I think that he probably thought he was doing what's best for his country because I mean, well, he couldn't though, Stephen. Like
he couldn't. Yeah, that's right.
but he already did though. That's what I'm saying. He probably already fought in the war, and so he thought it was the same kind of war. It wasn't called World War One then.
But
like they didn't know it was going to be a world war. Like it was not called World War
One. Any human being should force or should encourage any other human, even if you've been through it, you think it's noble. I mean, my grandfather didn't say to my father, "You should go to Vietnam. It's a horrible thing. People are dying. People your age are dying, coming back and body back. Go ahead." No, he had survived World War II and still said you shouldn't be doing it. It makes my skin crawl, and I guess it's the way the movie's meant to be. Because that speech really goes.
Mm-hmm.
It really changes as it goes. It changes and becomes more, not pushy, but just more, are you going to do this? And as opposed to being inspirational, it becomes accusatory. That's great writing. It really makes
Well, it's just a mob mentality. James, what's the final thoughts on it, James? And we'll move on.
This is what I'm saying with like my whole point. This is the first industrial mass killing. This is when war became absolute terrible. It's not like when knights used to fight on horseback and they would or the Italian mercenaries would make deals with each other saying, hey, we'll just say we fought and we'll just pick a winner to get the money. It's not like that. This is when war became terrible.
Yeah.
I would counter that by saying the Civil War was just as terrible. Not on the massive level.
No, it was not.
No, it is not.
Because they're in the fields, like facing each other. They're not hunking in the trenches with crap up to their elbows and rats running around. It's not the same. And they wouldn't have known. And they wouldn't have known that because you gotta realize Germany wouldn't have known about Civil War probably. I mean, like the average person didn't know about the Civil War in America. It's not a big thing to them.
I just don't think that we can say that this is when war changed became gruesome. I think it's always been gruesome. I mean, that's just
correct, because killing is killing, but it's a different level because if you read any articles or any kind of soldiers before they go off, it's all about it's an honorable war. It's all because it's you're serving your country. It's not you're in this trench hole and you're begging to get 7 feet every day. It's just a different. I don't know. I guess I can't. I must not be doing a good job of explaining it, but it's just let us know in the comments y'all's thoughts. How about that? We'll settle the debate in the comments below. Let's move on because we got a lot to cover. I'm gonna skip down. So in the movie, Paul, our main character, I would say he's the main character. His friend Hans dies basically. Dies at one point. Spoiler. What do you think the significance is of him taking the shoes? James, why don't you start us first on this one?
Well, he took the shoes, I don't know. You wouldn't, waste a good pair of shoes, but, it's this prized possession, and you're it's just going to go on the ground. You might as well give it away to somebody else. Give it to your friend, or your body might get looted facing the war. I don't know. That's where my mind is at. Please take care of him for me.
Yeah, I'll go and I'll let Stephen wrap it up. I think it signifies the dehumanity or dehumanization of war, that we eventually become we become basically worth a pair of boots. And I don't think it's a bad thing because, that's wrong word, wrong saying. I don't think Hans or Paul wanting the boots was wrong because on a practical level, he's 100% correct. You're not going to need these. You're dead. You're about to die. Why should I suffer and not have nice boots when I've got to continue the legacy and I've got to continue going on? Because they didn't all have boots or they didn't all have the appropriate attire. I mean, they were starving. They were eating their boots, essentially. And so I think that I think it just shows what war can do to people when it dehumanizes you to the point of what you can offer someone after you die for your possessions. But I don't blame Paul. I guess my thing is I don't have a problem with Paul doing this. Steven, I think you had a different opinion on this.
I had a very different position about this. Because when I watched it, I actually wrote notes as I was watching this. And I'll say what I wrote.
Yeah, please.
If you're not going to use these boots, oh my God. I just went, are you kidding me? Your friend just realized he's got his leg cut off, and you're asking for his boots? mean, I understand your point from it. It was like, that's disgusting. I understand his place, and when he sort of talks to Paul afterwards, goes, look, I'm just trying to, I need this. I get it.
Yeah.
And Hans is the next person to give them to him afterwards. But that ask made me go, wow. So just if you put yourself into that character's position, I just want to have, so you're not going to need all your shoes, right? I take all these shoes, so you're not going to need that, right? It just made me go, wow. At that moment, it was really a weird ask. That's all.
Well, he kind of has two options there because he's either going to die or he's going to get sent home because he lost his foot. So one way or the other, he's not going to need his shoes regardless. So,
but he just realized it. Like, and
yeah, because he's like trying to scratch his. Yeah.
He just realized it. Wow. So it just made me go, whoa.
But James has a point. James has a point too, though, about like I'm surprised when they passed away that they didn't take them off and give them to other people. I know they did in some stuff. They would take off their jackets and whatever and give them to other soldiers. So like I know that happens.
Yeah, I guess that does.
But I see your point though, and I guess would you have felt that way if it was somebody he didn't know?
What do you mean?
Like there was like a random soldier that was about to die that was going to die in the trenches. Is it just because it's his friend? Is that and just the lack of humanity?
Just to me, it was just a shocking. I don't know. You just found out you're blind. You're not gonna need these sunglasses, right? I mean, it was just like, what? What are you saying? Are you that inhuman right now?
Stevie Wonder would like to speak with you, Stephen.
I guess that's the point. But it made me go, wow. Wow. Because I'll tell you this right now. I like both of you. I think you're great guys. Ask me for my boot after I find out my leg is gone. You're not getting it. You're not going to get it. Now I'll burn them.
It'll be in my butt. No, he'll kick us out. Then we'll get it.
Burn the damn boots. I'm going to watch you burn the boots. I'd be like, no way. So I get what you're saying, but just at that moment, it was a weird act.
You're assuming that's the point of the moment where you don't have the luxury of humanity.
Yeah.
Like this movie shows you got to do what you got to do. Those boots are going to cause him to reduce blisters. That might be the difference between he lives or dies.
Yeah, or like getting trench foot, and losing his foot. It really just. I don't think we realize. Obviously, we've never been in the military or war, just how important having boots are. And that's like we all can assume, obviously, but this war in particular, because I'm telling you, man, these trenches were filthy, like disgusting. Like honestly, I'm surprised when the rats show up that they didn't barbecue those rats in that one scene, because that's what they had to do eventually. But yeah, but it definitely shows. I definitely appreciate. And then
that's what I think the moment is about. The moment is about trying to inspire that in me, which it immediately did.
So it did its job. Now let's continue to dehumanize Paul here. The scene where, or maybe not, maybe the opposite. How do you think the scene where Paul kills the French soldier, how do you think that event changed him?
Well, it's one thing to shoot somebody from afar. It is another thing close up with the knife.
Yeah.
So, like, stabbing. That is a different type of killing.
And it watch them die slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not a quick bleed out. They're just slowly dying, and they're looking at you as they die. And there's nothing you can really do. You try to save them to fill your guilt. Like, I can't imagine how that would work.
Because there's a language barrier too, so you can't even be like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry." Like,
there's that scene from Casino Royale where Bond makes his first kill, and when he's going to get the second kill, the guy talks and says, "Made you feel it, did he?" So there's something about being so close to that person for your first kill, and Kat says that later for the first time on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's still the same as like you can mold him down on machine guns. You're not that close to it.
Yeah.
But here's the guy that you're looking him in the eye, and
you see life leave his eyes.
Yeah, it's you or him.
And I'm not gonna lie, I think I would have done what Paul did. I think I would have grabbed his things and I'm gonna look out for you. Like I think I would have legit done that. But she may hate me, but I'm gonna let her know that I'm sorry for what I did and that maybe one day she can forgive me. But no, I think it was a very touching scene. I think it was kind of opposite of the scene with him with the shoes, but I think it shows his contradiction, and I think he starts to realize this war is crap. Like, and that guy was just doing his job like he was doing his job, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That exact, you just hit the nail on the head. His job.
Right.
That's what makes me angry about it. That's what makes me angry with this movie. Is that, especially when he goes back home, and all of the old men are like, oh, this is great. Shut up.
Yeah.
You're not there. You don't know anything about it. Shut up. And then when the students behind the counter, you don't know anything. Shut up.
We'll get to that. A little
It
forward.
makes me really angry. It's his job, and it's a job given to him by people who aren't there.
Well, that's a good fit, because that's the next thing. How do you guys think that Paul's leave affected him, and how was he different from when he left? I'll let you go first, Steven, since you have a pretty good opinion on this.
I mean, it's obvious to me. If you put this part of this going home and coming back into the Vietnam, the Deer Hunter.
Deer Hunter.
They're a different movie. I mean, because you see the effects of war on them when they return home, and now we get. I've been to the war. I go home for the week. I go back to the war, and he wants to go back to the war. I mean, he's so sick of the pretentiousness and the artifice of what they think war is.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get back to it. I just want to get back to it because this is disgusting. If you think this is pretty and noble, I don't want to be here. And he can't be around his own family. Who he loves. He has to get out of it. And that shows that he's gone from being this idealist who was convinced to go to war by that schmuck. And then, who's, here's a boy I inspired to go to war. And the others are all dead. Happy? I don't know, it really made me mad. So it obvious is that he can't deal with it's PTSD, and he can't deal with the reality of where he was. He's a changed man. Well, I've said this before in the podcast. My Uncle Bob was in Vietnam, and everybody in my family goes, you didn't know Bobby before the war. Bobby was a different man. He came home a different person from Vietnam. And he rarely speaks, he rarely talks. What do? He does listen. Because, he's going to say something. So it's the same thing. Something's died, something has been born. It's different with this man.
Yeah. And James, I don't mean to cut you off, sorry. I think I wanted to, the same anger that Stephen felt for the teacher, I felt for the kids. And it's not the kids' fault, but it just irritated me, because I just imagine like a soldier coming home like nowadays, and he's talks in the classroom and they call him cowards. Like, that is such a disrespectful thing, and that's kind of how but they don't know either though. They're blind to it. And yeah, I mean, him coming home, it really did feel kind of like the Deer Hunter, like how they don't belong at the end. It's like they come back and they're just like, yeah, I don't know what to do with myself, like you said. And I don't know, James, what was your thoughts, and then we'll kind of move on.
Well, so he came back, like, but when he was in the war, like, when they were talking about where they didn't learn anything in school, they didn't, like, how to clean a rifle and how to do all that stuff. Like, what is learning about the useless stuff for the education? So it's like, the education system didn't set him up for how terrible it is. So, I think the leave just, he probably felt partially guilty being on, getting all this food, all this stuff. So he probably wanted to get back because he could help his buddies. Like, I don't know, it's a tough thing.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, which, at the end of the movie, which was his home? The home where all his buddies are, or his actual home?
And he comes back and none of his buddies is already gone.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so it's like he's left with the one guy, which we'll get into in the last segment.
Yeah, Dorothy goes back to Oz and the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and they're all dead. Like, oh, great.
Although I will give a little credit, it is kind of funny that, like, he basically tells the lady, the French girl, that it's just gonna be a one night stand. Like, it's just so funny. He's like,
the scene before that.
I love you, but I'm never gonna see you. Like, I just love it.
When their older friend dives into the lake and pulls out bread.
Where'd that come from?
Steven.
What? No, Steven wants to know. He does want to know.
A bottle, maybe scored Mike at it. The bread, and they're still excited that the bread from the muddy lake is ready for him. I was like, bleh.
Yeah, but I guess it's better than eating your boots. Now I know it's the women, obviously, but you know. That's funny. I forgot about that scene. That's so funny.
It came out of the water. What the hell? And the fish girl like, yay, baguette. I mean,
You've never heard of a loaffish? Those are in the. I mean, you've never heard of that? Like, come on.
I'm just looking at this going, that is the most disgusting thing. And I just see their butts, so that was fine. And all of a sudden they're pulling bread out of the water. Like, what the hell is going on?
That was a hard scene because of those subtitles for me on this when I watched it. I had no idea what they were saying. I was like, yeah.
I have no idea either.
I mean, I knew what he was saying, obviously, but I didn't know what the French girl was saying. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm sure it's something. But that is kind of funny, though.
I love it.
That's a good point. Okay, then let's get into this. Is a major spoiler alert. So if you made it this far and you haven't seen the film, I don't know why you're here, but please turn it off now if you haven't. What do you guys think? What is the significance in the way in which Paul dies?
Pointless, the whole damn thing was.
That's
what it is.
Well, it's true, but I think when he talks about, he talks in many different times about the open field, the nature. He really wants, he sees that and wants to, he's imagining that. And so and he also sees the butterflies that his sister brought. So it's this piece, he's longing to go back to nature, longing to be not just at home, but in this sense of an open land where there's no war and there's just freedom. And he just reads it. It's a great symbol and metaphor.
It's so good. Like,
just reaching out for this thing.
And like, so I knew what happened in the movie, but I thought in this iteration, I thought he was going to die in the field with his friend. Like, I thought he was going to get blown up by the random pilot.
But gosh.
But that scene, because he lets his guard down, and then you're mad at the sniper, but yet, if he didn't do that, we would be speaking German right now. Like, obviously not just him, but I mean, like, because the sad thing is that guy who killed him is probably just as scarred as, I mean, I know Paul's dead, but Paul probably would have been had he survived. Like, it is a great, like, honestly, that's one of my favorite, because it's, like, so ahead of his time. It's a 100-year-old movie, and just to show his hand, like you said earlier about the hands on the fence, you knew what happened, and it symbolized it perfectly.
Never show. Let the audience feel it too much. Never show it.
And I'm so glad that they didn't do like the and his hand fall quick. It's like slowly, like you know. James, what do you think?
I was so infuriated with that ending. I was so mad. Like, come on, let him live. Why do they everyone have to die?
Because you really think he's gonna make it. It's like 2 minutes left in the movie. Yeah. You're like, he's made it.
And I'll say why he's a writer. It's our writer friend who's written this. I thought so. The idea is he survives and writes the book. Like, that's what I thought. No, kill him.
No, everyone dies. Like, I was so mad at the ending. I was like, at least just gives me a little shred of hope. And then they crushed that little hope that I had because of a freaking butterfly. No, like I hated the ending so bad.
It's like I felt when I watched it. The last 2 or 3 minutes had the same feeling about that I had when I watched Rogue One. Like in the middle of Rogue One, I said, "Oh my God, all these people are dead." Like, oh my God, they're all
no, 100%. It's 100% accurate.
It didn't hit. That's when I went, "Oh no!" And then he's like, "Said I'm sorry, but you're not taking it." Yeah.
So I think. To me, the symbolism goes so much more deeper because I'm happy for Paul because in that moment, I feel like he experienced that second of peace where he, for a moment, he went back and, like you said, probably forgot about the war. And that's a very good ending. Like, that's a lasting moment. Obviously, I wish he would live too, but I think it shows how great this movie was is that we as Americans feel sorry for this guy. Now, I know they're humans, obviously, and they do speak English, so they don't really come off as German. But, I mean, you've been taught our whole lives to hate the Germans because they were some terrible people in the army. Not all of them, obviously, but they were some terrible that just took pleasure in killing people. I don't think Paul's one of them, obviously, but it's just, I think there's a little, I think we all can see ourselves in Paul, too.
I think they separate lives.
because we're normal and we're like, oh crap, what I signed up for, and then you're just trying to survive, and then you kind of get the hang of it. You're like, okay, I obviously it's not great, but I can survive this. And then you let your guard down, and that's how war is, man. You let your guard down for a second, you're done. Anyway, so I do want to give a shout out and just talk about this, and then we'll move on to the like should it have won and whatnot. Is can we just talk about how good the bomb sounded and how annoying they were? So like I listened to it on my headphones and on my computer, and that one scene where it's like it's about the middle of the movie and it's a long battle scene, like they're running and it's like an aerial view. And those bombs went off for like 12 minutes. And I'm sitting here like, God, I can't imagine that. Like, I think they do a fantastic job of never stopping doing it. Like, it's always going on. And I just want to give them credit. For this movie to be 100 years old, it is not outdated in the slightest, in my opinion.
This movie was kind of hard for me to watch because I'm just hearing the bombing and like I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to watch this. Like just get this done with me. But the constant bombing, and I only had to deal with it for an hour.
Yeah,
of the
right.
movie. I can't imagine this is such a great anti-war movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the best ever made.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So then, I think I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask you guys anyway. Steven, you start with me. Did you like the movie? Like, I mean, relative, obviously.
I liked the movie. I did. I think it was quite a good movie. I mean, it was really it still stands up. Like you said, the sound design. We're talking mono sound is outstanding. Because there's so many different sounds coming at you constantly, and there's different kinds of bombs going on here, and you get that sense that that's why they went. I gotta get out of here. I can't stay here. I mean, that was that I don't know if any of you've ever had like a fear put into you because of experience, but I have, and that's what this was. They were claustrophobic before the war, but now they're stuck in this little place. These bombs, they don't know when it's gonna blow them up. And that's when the crack. I mean, that kind of sound design would have brought that forward. And the epic scope of, like you're saying, when they're pulling back with the tracking shots, and they go on, and there's no cuts. That kind of choreography takes days.
Yeah, I can't fathom that.
And that's not. I mean, that's just happening. Okay, you're here, and you're from here, and then this guy here. I mean, those tracking shots with people with knives, and this, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
And it goes on. It doesn't stop. There's no cuts. Boom. We're moving through. I mean, that takes a lot of time and a lot of skill. With a lot of people. So yeah.
James, what about you? Did you like this movie?
I like this movie a lot. Mainly how uncomfortable it made me. But it's one of the very few movies that's done it. It's such a great movie, and I cannot highly recommend it enough. If you are pro-war, watch this movie.
Even if you're not, it's just a good movie to watch. I know me and James have seen the 2022 version. I don't think Steven has, but
No.
James, which one do you like better?
So I think they're both great with different things. I think overall this is the better movie, but the 2022 version, the German version that they made, that movie is so much more infuriating because of how it ends.
Yeah.
It's they literally fight up until the armistice, till the war is over.
Yeah.
They're all right, we're done. And it's that movie is so much more infuriating.
100%, yeah.
But
and then this movie's more accurate to the book, just so you guys know the way this ended.
Okay.
And it's kind of crazy because you look at the winner before this, 1929, which is called a Broadway musical. Most people say it's terrible, because it's and then
I'm sorry, what is terrible?
A Broadway musical, the winner before this, and then the winner after this, whatever 1931 is, I think it's the Great Ziegfeld or whatever. It's one of those we've seen.
Cimarron.
It's Cimarron.
Cimarron.
It's it's sandwiched in between two of the worst rated Oscar movies, and it's I think it's because it's source material. I think it's real, obviously, but Yeah. James, you like,
Robert
yeah.
Miller.
Or Brother Melody, sorry. Yeah.
First Academy Awards I can forgive because they didn't have their crap together. Second one they nailed. Third Academy Awards, what were you thinking?
No, this is the third one.
This is
Oh,
the
fourth or whatever.
Yeah, so the
on the first time, which I think deserves it.
Wings, and then The Artist are the only two silent films to win. And then Broadway, Melody started had sound, and then this one it rested of sound. So
Okay.
3 and 4, yeah. So 3 was good. 1 you understood. 2 and 4 were buns.
Then we get into the world of Super Rock.
They were mid, as the kids would say. Alrighty.
Gross.
Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. Should it have won? I don't care what the other ones are. I'm gonna say yes, but I'm gonna read them anyway. All Quiet on the Western Front. IMDb gives it an 8.1. I've never seen or heard any other movies. So, The Big House got a 7.1. Raleigh got a 6.0. The Divorcee got a 6.7, and The Love Parade got a 7. I think this deserves to, just because I've never seen it. Like, to me, culturally, the fact it's 100 years, and I still had to read this book in college, is enough for me to pick this to win.
Oh, those three of those titles sound like they could be like ABC, like reality shows. The Big House, The Love Parade,
And The Divorcee.
It just kills me.
That's funny.
The Divorcee, The Love Parade. Don't miss The Love Parade. Thursdays at 10. Like all this stuff.
Tune in with 12 hot young singles. Take on the Love Parade.
12 8-year-old boys. Here we go. The Divorcee.
It's what you always wanted. The Miracle on 34th Street meets Love Island. Bam! We have a movie.
Oh my God.
We're gonna pitch
That'd be a
it.
hilarious mashup.
We're gonna pitch it to TLC. We got it. All right, I think you guys can agree this. Yeah, you guys agree this should have won.
Okay.
Here comes James. Give me.
I agree. Okay, yes, it's obscure.
I'm gonna mute him.
Listen,
I'm gonna mute him.
okay, Soup to Nuts.
Okay.
It was by. Listen to me. Let me justify my answer.
I've heard about it, so I can.
So, like, by Rupert Goldberg, the Three Stooges were in there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Element. It was a great film. Now, should it have won the Oscar? No, but it should have been. It should have been. It's like nominated on versus the other ones. Come on, Steven. It's like vaudeville transition. Have you seen that one? It's a great film.
Its title is Soup to Nuts. So
Yes, and it is an amazing film. I'd say it's
Steven, isn't that your autobiography about you?
It was one of the things
Rupert
we paid for on my
Goldberg.
OnlyFans, the Soup to Nuts. It's great. It's fun. But
made a movie. And like all of the crazy sets. Forget about the title. It's a great film.
And the Three
It's like
Stooges.
Also
are
public
there.
domain.
it's either this or Flubber. You know what I'm saying? Like Soup to Nuts. Come on. Seriously.
Watch it, Steven. It will change your mind.
All right. Well, everybody.
We're so
Now we're-
sorry. We're so sorry.
Yeah. Sorry for the rant. So now we're gonna pick our next movie. The good news is we only have like 2 1930s films. So let's go ahead and pick the next one for the 30s.
Another
I hope we
30.
get. I can't wait to get to Gone with the Wind. I'm looking forward to that.
Let's go. We only have 2. We have 3
Oh.
left. We have Gone
I
with the
wanna dress like
Wind.
Gone- Yeah.
We have It Happened One Night, and then there's one
Ah,
more. we
great.
have.
Great. movie.
Oh, there's one more. Yeah. So like, I'll be happy with those 2. Anyway, let me share
I'll
my
dress like
screen.
Bill Watman if we get Gone with the Wind.
It's the other one.
Is there enough fabric for that?
You are such a. I'm going to use the word if we done with that one too.
Can you guys see?
Oh my gosh.
Here we
I
go.
love Miss Titty Cat though. Oh, Yankees in Atlanta.
Next week we are watching
Oh, good,
The Departed, 2006.
Great.
I have seen this movie. James, have you seen it?
Oh yeah.
I think I
I'm
watched
looking
for
forward
5
to
minutes.
this.
I'm
I
done.
cannot wait to see Steven's take on it.
I would hate
This is the most manliest man movie of all. I love it. And it's such a good twist. Anyway, it's a great film.
I'll say this. I loved what's that?
Gladiator?
Gladiator?
No, the one that he did with some. I always wanted to be the mom. That
Who?
He, the same filmmaker.
Oh, I don't know. Goodfellas?
Goodfellas. I love Goodfellas.
Yeah.
But the Departed was
We're going to have some
There's no
words.
musical number anywhere. There's no musical, not one.
we're gonna have
Not
some
one-
words.
Not one ballad. Not when I want some. Not one.
They don't have to because the theme song is Dropkick Murphy, Ship Up to Boston. What more can you ask for? And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of 2026. If you made it this far, please do consider giving us a like, comment, share. We do appreciate that. Our goal this year, we're going to try to do some different things. We're going to talk about that down the road. But for now, please give us a like and join us as we jump forward 90-something years to the 2006 The Departed. Until next time, I will depart you. This is the Chicago Cinephiles.
What the fuck?
You will be judged in the first 3 seconds someone hears you speak, not by what you say, by how you sound. And that judgment, it's permanent. You could have a PhD, you could be the smartest person in the room, but if your accent is wrong, if your voice hits their ear the wrong way, you are done, finished, dismissed. They will smile, they will nod, but in their head, you have already been filed under less than. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing you can say to change it, because the decision was made before you even finished your first sentence. If this pisses you off, if this makes you realize how many times you have been judged, or how many times you have judged others without even knowing it, drop a comment right now. Tell me the last time someone dismissed you because of how you sounded. Or better yet, tell me the last time you caught yourself doing it to someone else, because this video is going to make you uncomfortable. And uncomfortable truths need to spread, so share this. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Let's force this conversation into rooms where people would rather keep it buried. This is not about being sensitive. This is not about political correctness or hurt feelings. This is about raw, brutal, deep